Chapter 100. Yu Dai, who was left behind, was puzzled. She asked, "Grandpa Chu, why are you so nice to him? You even let him borrow the martial arts school's manual?" The third Master Chu smiled and said, "Have you seen the martial arts school's manual?" Yu Dai said, "I haven't." The third Master Chu asked again, "Then why haven't you seen it?" Yu Dai asked curiously, "Why would I look at the manual? Don't the martial arts school's masters teach me? If I were to look at the manual wrongly, then it would be a matter of life and death during a fight." I understand now. Grandpa Chu, the older the ginger, the spicier it is. You gave a useless manual to Zhang Xiaohu as a favor for no reason. The third Master Chu smiled and said, "That's right. You have to consider everything carefully. You can't just look at the surface. I brought Zhang Xiaohu from being a bodyguard to the martial arts school with the intention of roping him in. I'm using this as a favor for his younger brother. He will definitely remember my kindness. Moreover, how can someone like him, who has no foundation, learn a profound inner strength cultivation method if he enters the martial arts school? Won't he still have to follow me?" Yu Dai also smiled and said, "I understand now. Grandpa Chu, if he listens to you, then you will teach him a profound inner strength cultivation method. Otherwise, you can just find someone to teach him a normal cultivation method. In any case, any inner strength cultivation method will be out of his reach." The third Master Chu smiled proudly and praised him, "You are a promising child. However, you left out two things. First, whether it's a profound inner strength cultivation method or a normal inner strength cultivation method, this Zhang Xiaohu will never be able to master it. He will always be under the control of our escort agency. Secondly, his younger brother's hand is already crippled. Even if I show him the inner strength mantra of the martial arts school, he won't be able to learn it, let alone a mere fist manual, and an extremely ordinary one at that." Yu Dai's face was full of regret as he said, "Grandpa Chu, I didn't expect you to be so talented." The third Master Chu twirled his beard and chuckled. It was as if his name was Proud. How would Zhang Xiaohu know about this? He only cared about pleasing his younger brother so that he would have something to do and not have time to think about his injuries. The collection in the martial arts center was very rich. There were many saber manuals, sword manuals, and so on. Of course, most of them were the fist manuals, which filled up the entire shelf. Zhang Xiaohu scanned through them and found that there were at least 100 manuals. He could not help but feel surprised and happy at the same time. He was surprised that there were so many fist manuals. If the bodyguard agency's collection was only this much, then what about the ones circulating in Jianghu? He used to be a frog in a well. Even though it was good to specialize in different techniques, he would still take a look when he had the time. He was happy that there were so many fist manuals, which would probably be enough for his younger brother to read during this period of time. Even after he recovered from his injuries, it would still be enough for him to read for a while. However, he immediately felt a little sad. Once his injuries were healed and his younger brother knew that he could no longer practice martial arts, would he still look at these fist manuals? Looking at so many fist manuals, Zhang Xiaohu did not know how to choose. However, after thinking about it, he still took the first one on the top. Actually, it didn't matter. He planned to let Xiaohua pass the time anyway. Anyone would do. If not, he would let him read one by one. Hee. However, looking at the shelves full of books, Zhang Xiaohu felt a headache coming on. He could not help but shake his head. How could it be? He took out the fist manual and the person in charge casually flipped through it and recorded it in a booklet. He did not ask much and let Zhang Xiaohu take it away. With the fist manual in his arms, Zhang Xiaohu hummed a country song and walked back to his room with relaxed steps. As soon as he opened the door, he heard Li Jinfeng talking to Zhang Xiaohua. "Xiaohua, I don't want to praise you, but you are really too damn smart. I advise you to give up on martial arts and pursue literature. What's so good about practicing martial arts? Fighting and killing every day without a single peaceful day. Then you can study literature, read books, and write poems. You won't be blown by the wind or drenched by the rain. Isn't that great? Zhang Xiaohu heard this and was baffled. He said, Young Master Li, what's going on? When Li Jinfeng saw Zhang Xiaohu enter the room, he happily pulled his hand and said, Zhang Xiaohu, help me persuade your younger brother. He is still a child. Why should he suffer so much to learn martial arts? With his brain, if he studied hard for 2 years, it would be easy for him to get some scholarly honor. When the time comes, he can walk on the path of an official. Wouldn't that be great? Zhang Xiaohu was still confused. He said, Is Xiaohua very smart? How come I don't know? I watched him grow up. I never heard that he was a child prodigy. If he was smart, my father would have sent him to school a long time ago. Why would he bring him around school? When Li Jinfeng heard this, he frowned and said, I don't know what Xiaohua was like when he was young. But now that he has grown up, perhaps he has been enlightened. Zhang Xiaohu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, You should be clear. What's going on? I don't know what's going on. How can I persuade him? Li Jinfeng smiled and said, I was too rash and too impatient. Hee, you weren't in the room often these days, so I was teaching Little Blossom how to read. In the beginning, his learning speed was quite normal, just like a normal person. But later on, his learning speed became faster and faster. In this period of time, he was already able to read this fist technique manual. Also, look at his writing. Although he was sitting on the Kong bed and writing with his left hand, it was actually quite standard and his improvement was godly. His aptitude is 100 times better than mine. It's a pity that he doesn't go to school. Zhang Xiaohu's heart moved. He picked up Zhang Xiaohua's writing. Sure enough, he remembered seeing him write at home before. The writing was of different sizes, like crabs crawling. The writing on the paper was neat and looked very neat. Thus, he said to Zhang Xiaohua who was sitting on the Kong, Xiaohua, I see that you have a great talent in reading. You were young before so I didn't notice it. Fortunately, you're not old now. I think you should go study literature. In the future, if you become a top scorer, you can bring glory to the family. Father and mother will be very happy. Zhang Xiaohua said in a serious tone, Of course not. Second brother, Mr. Liu and Lu Kai's knowledge is not bad. But when sister-in-law is being bullied, can they intervene? Since I've embarked on the path of martial arts, I definitely won't give up halfway. Don't you think so, Brother Li? If I change my mind every now and then, how can I become a capable person? Zhang Xiaohu saw that he had made up his mind, so he didn't try to persuade him. Li Jinfeng's eyes lit up as he listened. He secretly said in his heart, This is clearly a rare character. Even his refusal is so eloquent. How can I let him go? Didn't the doctor say that Zhang Xiaohua can't practice martial arts in the future? I won't try to persuade him anymore. I'll just preach in detail. When he knows that he has no way to practice martial arts, won't he still come and study literature with me? Thinking about this, he rolled his eyes and said, Xiaohua's words are reasonable. But practicing martial arts should be to strengthen the body. Fighting and killing in Jianghu is not harmonious. If you have the opportunity to study literature, you must inform your brother Li, Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, Okay. When the time comes, I will definitely learn from Brother Li. However, I think Brother Li will definitely be disappointed. Li Jinfeng said with a smile, If he's disappointed, then he's disappointed. The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. It doesn't matter. Now that you know a lot of words and can read the fist manual, I'll give you the ancient books that we read tomorrow. Even if you don't study literature, reading these will be very beneficial for your martial arts practice. Really? Then thank you, Brother Li. Tomorrow, bring it to me early so that I can read it. I've been reading this fist manual for the past few days. It's boring. Zhang Xiaohua was very happy when he heard this. Li Jinfeng said as if he had seen a fish that had taken the bait, Since you know that the fist manual is boring, the ancient books I'll bring tomorrow will definitely make you read them with great interest. You won't be willing to let them go. Then, he looked at the sky, packed his things, and bid farewell. After Li Jinfeng left, Zhang Xiaohu looked tenderly at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Xiaohua, I didn't know that you were so literate and had such good aptitude. I think you should consider young Master Li's suggestion. Being able to live a peaceful life is also a good choice." Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, "Second brother, why are you so long-winded today? I've never been very smart since I was young. The teachers all said so. Who knows what's going on now? Maybe Brother Li was just joking. I've never thought of going to study. Is there something second brother wants to say?" Ahem, Zhang Xiaohu coughed for a while and quickly changed the topic, saying, "There really is something I want to tell you." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, "What is it, second brother? You've learned to keep me in suspense?" Zhang Xiaohu mysteriously took out the fist manual from his chest and said, "Look, what is this?" Zhang Xiaohua took it and carefully looked at it, saying, "Isn't this the Erlang Fist's manual?" "Second brother, where did you get this?" "Erlang Fist?" Zhang Xiaohu was stunned and quickly took the manual. He carefully looked at it. That's right, the big 2 on the cover was right there. He was preoccupied with taking the manual and didn't look at it carefully. It was fine if he didn't recognize the other 2 words, but he actually didn't see the 2. It was really embarrassing. This kind of lack of education was really scary. That librarian was also the same. He actually didn't read it. Zhang Xiaohu's face was a bit red. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's curious gaze, Zhang Xiaohu mumbled to her about what happened in the afternoon. When Zhang Xiaohua heard that second brother had actually found such a good opportunity for her, her eyes lit up as if they could release countless stars. She loudly said, "Second brother, I really admire you. You're my lifelong idol. Thank you." Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's excitement as expected, Zhang Xiaohu was happy from the bottom of his heart. However, he still said, "Let's forget about this first book. I'll immediately go get you another one." Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly stopped him and said, "Don't change it yet, second brother. We just borrowed it, so go get it changed. Don't let anyone say anything. If you don't let us borrow it, then it won't be good. Let's leave it here for now and go get it changed tomorrow." Zhang Xiaohu could only say, "Okay, I'll go tomorrow morning." Afterwards, Zhang Xiaohua excitedly asked about the librarian's situation. Zhang Xiaohu also explained in detail. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua was abnormally happy and said, "That's great, second brother. I must read through all the fist manuals inside." Zhang Xiaohu thought about that shelf of books and didn't have the heart to interrupt his younger brother's mood. He said, "Okay, I support you, Xiaohua." Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua asked again, "Second brother, have you seen any books on internal strength?" Zhang Xiaohu scratched his head and said, "I'm not very literate. How would I know which book is for internal strength? This fist manual was also taken by someone else to find it. However, I think that the mental cultivation method for internal strength shouldn't be shown to me or let me borrow it. They must have kept it very secretive." Zhang Xiaohua nodded when he heard this. If it could be easily borrowed, then what was so precious about it? Zhang Xiaohu casually threw the Erlang Fist manual on the Kong bed. After dinner, Zhang Xiaohu was still practicing his Liuha fist under the oil lamp. Zhang Xiaohua watched in boredom. He was really curious. Wasn't this just a set of Liuha fist? There were so many moves over and over again. What was there to practice? His second brother was still treating it like a treasure. He practiced it over and over again. Sometimes it was fast, sometimes it was slow. Was it really effective? He was very doubtful. He was extremely bored. He casually picked up the fist manual by the Kong bed and flipped through it under the faint light. As he flipped through it, he suddenly made a sound. His hand stopped on a page of the fist manual. Zhang Xiaohu, who was practicing, heard the sound and quickly asked, "What's wrong, Xiaohua?" "Oh, second brother, I saw a very strange place. Zhang Xiaohua explained, bring the oil lamp over. Zhang Xiaohu obeyed and brought the oil lamp closer. Zhang Xiaohua carefully looked at the page in front of him. He then picked up the other fist manual that Li Jinfeng brought over and flipped to the same page. He carefully compared it and then nodded. He said to Zhang Xiaohu with certainty, second brother, look at this place. This is the book that you borrowed from the library. This page is the move that I learned. Compared to the fist manual that Brother Li brought over, the side of the body is a bit stronger and the position of the fist strike is a bit lower. It's the same mistake that I made. However, the one that I remember is a bit stronger than the one you brought over. Zhang Xiaohu rubbed his chin and frowned. What does this mean? Mistakes can be made in the fist manual and mistakes can be made when the master teaches. Then wouldn't the Erlang fist that is passed down in the Jianghu be different? Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, second brother, what you said makes sense. Moreover, this fist technique has been passed down from the past to the present. It's probably not the same as before. Zhang Xiaohu said, yes. Although the big things won't change, the small details will definitely change a lot. Ha ha ha. Zhang Xiaohua faced the sky and let out a long laugh. Zhang Xiaohu stared blankly and said, are you crazy? Why are you laughing so lewdly? Ignore. Spoof. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, second brother, Captain, he said that my fist technique was wrong and always corrected me here and there. However, I just couldn't change it. Now it seems that as long as the moves are correct, there's no need to think so much about the details. In fact, no matter how much you think about it, what Captain he learned might not be the most correct. What do you think? Zhang Xiaohu nodded and said, you're right. Then, you're going to, Zhang Xiaohua said, I think that when I practice in the future, I'll rely on my memory. What I remember is what it is. What I remember is what it is. What I remember is what it is. I don't plan on correcting it. Zhang Xiaohu patted his head and mocked him, that's right. You can't change it even if you want to. If you don't do it this way, how can you do it? You're just finding an excuse for yourself. Zhang Xiaohua grinned and said, maybe. The knot in Zhang Xiaohua's heart was untied. He slowly flipped through the manual and tried to memorize more moves. In fact, when Li Jinfeng brought the manual over, he had already tried to memorize more moves. Unfortunately, at that time, he had a deep impression of it. When he recalled it the next day, other than those two moves, there was no trace of the other moves. It was just like when he practiced in the Huanxi mountain villa. Therefore, when Li Jinfeng praised him for being smart, he didn't dare to respond. This kind of memory was 1 in a million. It would be good if he didn't say that he was mediocre. How would he dare to wear the hat of being smart? If he was exposed one day, it would be very embarrassing. However, when it came to Li Jinfeng's teaching of literacy, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel proud. Just like Li Jinfeng said, he remembered it clearly and used his left hand more smoothly. However, just as Zhang Xiaohu said, he was already a teenager. He didn't need to be so proud of learning things that children taught him. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly heard a plop sound. Zhang Xiaohua looked up and saw that it was Zhang Xiaohu who had fallen to the ground. He couldn't help but become anxious and shouted, second brother, what's going on? Falling to the ground while practicing boxing was not a good thing. Could it be that he had gone mad? Who would have thought that Zhang Xiaohu would jump up like a carp? His posture was still confident and at ease. He patted the dust off his body and said, it's nothing, Xiaohua. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua let out a sigh of relief. Zhang Xiaohu explained, just now, when I hit a spot, there was still a gap in front of my fist. I suddenly thought of what you said just now. This boxing technique might be wrong. Thus, I extended my fist forward and my body leaned forward. My feet were still preparing to change to the next move. My waist didn't twist and I lost my balance. I fell down. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he raised his thumb and said, second brother, you really are a genius. Since ancient times, you are the first person to be able to fall down while practicing boxing. Although it can't be said that there won't be anyone in the future, this is something that no one has ever done before. Zhang Xiaohu spat and said, "That's what you get for your glib tongue." Then, Zhang Xiaohua stopped smiling and said sternly, "Second brother, what I said just now was just a guess. You can't take it seriously. Don't take it to heart. The Liuhe fist or Erlang fist has been passed down for so many years. Many people have practiced it, so it must have its benefits. If you suddenly change the style during a competition, you might be courting death. Moreover, everyone's martial arts path is different. At first, when I saw that you were so good at practicing only one set of Liuhe boxing, I wanted to learn from you. Moreover, there are probably other people in the escort agency who want to learn from you. But, look at me, I can't even remember the complete set of Arhat boxing. How can I only learn one set of boxing techniques?" When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he nodded slightly. Zhang Xiaohua continued, "So, your path is not my path, and my path is not your path. I changed the move because I couldn't remember it. You don't have to. You have practiced this Liuhe boxing for so long, how can you change it? Moreover, you don't know how to change it. Please add it to your collection, thank you." Chapter 101. Zhang Xiaohu thoughtfully nodded his head and didn't say anything else. After thinking for a moment, he went back to practicing. This time, he practiced very slowly. Zhang Xiaohua was worried and also watched for a while, but didn't see anything special. However, seeing her second brother's natural and smooth steps, it was probably normal, so she relaxed. His mind was placed on the fist manual in front of him again. However, as he looked at it, his vision became blurry, and he soon fell asleep. Ever since he was injured, Zhang Xiaohua's sleep came a lot earlier. He often fell asleep before midnight. It was probably because his body was weak and he needed to rest. In his dream, an unknown fluctuation spread from his left hand to his entire body. In his dream, the flickering was still the same. The next day, when Zhang Xiaohua woke up, the first thing he did was to quickly recall the moves of the Erlang fist from yesterday. Just like before, he was disappointed again. However, after being disappointed so many times, he was already used to it. He patted the two manuals next to him with an expressionless face. After breakfast, Zhang Xiaohu took the borrowed Erlang fist manual and went out. Not long after, Li Jinfeng, Mr. Li, came. He first asked about Zhang Xiaohua's situation, then mysteriously took out a thick book from his chest and said to Zhang Xiaohua with a sinister smile, "Xiaohua, look what good thing I brought for you." Zhang Xiaohua had a very bad feeling in his heart and said, "Brother Li, I can't guess what good thing this is." Li Jinfeng put the book in front of Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Look, what's written on it." Zhang Xiaohua looked at the cover and vaguely recognized the words, "Shuawen Jie." Puzzled, she said, "Isn't it Shuawen Jie? What kind of book is this?" Li Jinfeng giggled and said, "This book, it's a book that all scholars must know. It's the most basic of the basics. Look." As he spoke, Li Jinfeng opened the book and randomly flipped to a page and said, "Look, Xiaohua, every page of this book has many words. Then, there's the explanation of each word, meaning, and how to quote many ancient books. This is a required course for us scholars. I recommend that you completely memorize it from beginning to end. In the future, you won't have any problems learning to read and write." The pitiful Zhang Xiaohua looked at the densely packed words on the page and thought about how thick the book was. He had a headache and said, "Big brother Li, do I have to memorize all these words? It really isn't something that ordinary people can do. No wonder people respect you scholars so much. Amazing." Li Jinfeng smiled embarrassedly and said, Hey, that's right. The skill of grinding an iron rod into a needle isn't something that just anyone can do. However, I believe that with your talent, it won't be a problem." Zhang Xiaohua evaded and said, "Brother Li, you see, I don't specialize in studying. Can you make an exception? This thing is too thick, how can I learn it? Li Jinfeng firmly shook his head and said, no, if you want to do it, you have to do it the best and start from a professional. Moreover, this book is very basic and is especially suitable for you. This is something that I thought about all night before choosing for you. You mustn't disappoint my efforts. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Li Jinfeng's enthusiasm and bitterly opened the first page of the book. She listened to Li Jinfeng's explanation and began the genius training plan that Li Jinfeng specially prepared for Zhang Xiaohua. Wasn't this the legendary driving a duck onto a perch? Shuawen Jiezi was actually a dictionary. Of course, there were many things in it. The first page had 20 words and the annotations of these words added up to 400 to 500 words. Even the genius student in Li Jinfeng's eyes, Zhang Xiaohua, was dizzy. This wasn't a fist manual. There were pictures and impressions. It was lively and interesting to learn. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't bear it anymore. She just wanted to understand the fist manual. She wasn't the top scorer. Was there a need to work so hard? However, Li Jinfeng dismissed her with one sentence. Could it be that you're worse than an enlightened child? If you can't even learn this, how can you understand those abstract fist manuals? You practiced the fist manual last time and I explained it to you. If it's a brand new fist manual and you haven't practiced it at all, the things written in it are very important. If there's a mistake in a word, it will lead to Qigong deviation. Are you sure you don't want to learn these basic lessons? Zhang Xiaohua, who had never seen anyone enlighten him, was naturally speechless. For the sake of his martial arts, for the sake of saving the common people, and for the sake of saving the people of Jianghu from the abyss of suffering, he could only pull himself together and bury his head in the ground once more. Unfortunately, there was a limit to human strength. Zhang Xiaohua studied hard for a whole day. Even when Zhang Xiaohu came back at noon and quietly put a fist manual on the Kong, Zhang Xiaohua didn't have time to look at it. As a result, when Li Jinfeng left in the afternoon with a smile, she still hadn't finished learning the words on the first page. Zhang Xiaohua was depressed and depressed. Learning literature was much more difficult than practicing martial arts. No wonder there were so many forthright men in Jianghu. Without the spirit to endure hardships, they really couldn't make a living by writing. Li Jinfeng, who left, was 120% satisfied. No child had ever been enlightened from Shuawen Jiezi. It was a miracle that a person who had only read one fist manual could recognize 300 or 400 words in a day. Moreover, he was still confident in Zhang Xiaohua's memory. As long as she remembered it, she wouldn't forget it the next day. Then, she would really be his in the future. Today's results could be checked tomorrow. Thinking that a Confucian weirdo was going to blossom under his training, he felt excited to walk. After Li Jinfeng left, Zhang Xiaohua was very tired. Lying on the Kong, he was about to fall asleep. Suddenly, he remembered that his second brother had brought back a fist manual at noon. He immediately opened his eyes and became energetic. Picking up the fist manual on the Kong, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the darkening sky outside the window and clearly saw the three big words South Branch Fist on the cover. Oh, he had never heard of this fist technique before. Then, he opened the fist manual and slowly read from the first page. Fortunately, Li Jinfeng's teaching was still effective. Although he had just read the book for a day, he could recognize many of the words in the fist manual. As for the words that he didn't recognize, he could understand a little according to the pictures in the fist manual and his own guesses. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua read from the beginning to the end with great interest. Gradually, he felt that there seemed to be a little person in his mind, who was gesturing and practicing according to his understanding of the fist manual. When he finished reading the fist manual, the little person also finished practicing the fist technique. Involuntarily, Zhang Xiaohua was pleasantly surprised. This fist manual was really good stuff. However, although Zhang Xiaohua knew how to practice this fist technique, he still didn't understand the key points and precautions of each move and style. It was probably because he didn't understand the annotations. This would have to wait for Li Jinfeng to come tomorrow to explain word by word. Perhaps he would understand. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua was injured and could not practice. He did not know if his memory was correct, and if he could really rely on reading this fist manual without his master's guidance. Although he was afraid that Li Jinfeng would force him to study, but he also hoped that he would quickly come and explain the fist manual to him. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but feel conflicted. When he woke up the next day, Zhang Xiaohua habitually recalled the fist manual that he had read yesterday. He did not have any expectations, but this time he was greatly shocked. He actually remembered the South Branch fist that he had read yesterday from beginning to end. Zhang Xiaohua's mouth was wide open. He was overjoyed. My ancestors have finally shown me the light of day. Zhang Xiaohua was a little incoherent. He didn't know how to express his joy. Then, he became even more puzzled. What was the reason for this? Could it be that the heavens gave him a chance because he was injured? If that was the case, he was willing to recuperate every day. But didn't he only read the Erlang fist manual after he was injured? Why was it still the same 2 moves? Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. But soon, he did not have time to think. Li Jinfeng came again, and Zhang Xiaohua began the second day of learning Shua Wen Jie Zi. The second day's lesson was as difficult as the first day, and he still did not finish learning a single page. However, it was not that Zhang Xiaohua could not finish learning, but he requested Li Jinfeng to explain the South Branch fist manual to him. Although Li Jinfeng did not know martial arts, his ability to read and write was not for show. As he explained word by word, Zhang Xiaohua repeatedly nodded his head. By the time he finished explaining the fist manual, the sky was already dark. The food that Yu Luan had sent over had already been picked up by Zhang Xiaohu to heat up. Zhang Xiaohua and his brother warmly invited him to stay, so Li Jinfeng did not stand on ceremony. They chatted as they ate, and the 3 of them were very harmonious. After Li Jinfeng left, Zhang Xiaohu was still vigorously practicing in the room, while Zhang Xiaohua was lying on the kong. The fist technique that Li Jinfeng had just explained flowed through his mind, and it was as clear as the fist technique that he had learned before. Could it be that this was his way of practicing martial arts? Zhang Xiaohua could not help but ponder to himself. However, Zhang Xiaohua could faintly feel that the flow of this technique was different from the flow of the previous techniques. The previous techniques were vivid and lifelike, and it was like a real person, practicing the fist technique. However, this South Branch fist technique was like a human figure practicing the fist technique. The fist technique was clear, but there was no charm to it. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua tried the same trick again. He wanted to mix this South Branch fist technique with the techniques that he had learned before, and see if he could find a perfect combination of techniques. However, he quickly realized that he was wrong. This South Branch fist technique was like a complete set of fist techniques, and his previous techniques could not be inserted into it. What was going on? Zhang Xiaohua looked at his second older brother who was practicing in the room. He wanted to call out to him for reference, but he suddenly remembered Zhang Xiaohu's fall yesterday, and he gave up on that thought. It was better to solve his own problems himself. He did not want to drag his second older brother into this and ruin his cultivation for no reason. When he woke up the next day, Zhang Xiaohua was still trying to recall his memories. He nervously tested to see if his joy from yesterday was short-lived. The result was a pleasant surprise for Zhang Xiaohua. The techniques that Li Jinfeng had explained before were all in his mind, and there was nothing missing. It was like a treasure trove that was filled with treasures, waiting for him to recover so that he could practice them one by one. Once again, Zhang Xiaohua's tears flowed freely. The heavens have pity on me, I'm finally not trash anymore. In the morning, Zhang Xiaohu still had to go out. These few days, Zhang Xiaohu was preparing to go to the training center to study, and he still had some things to take care of with the guards. When he suddenly saw Zhang Xiaohua's sad and happy expression, he hurriedly said, "Xiaohua, what's wrong? Looking like this, is there a change in your injury? Is your arm hurting again?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "It's fine, second older brother. The injury doesn't hurt as much as before, so it's probably getting better. I've already read this fist technique manual, can you give me a new one today? Zhang Xiaohu stared blankly and said in disbelief, you've really finished reading it? Immediately, as if he understood, he hurriedly said, okay, it's fine. I'll immediately change it for you. Zhang Xiaohua felt that her second older brother seemed to have misunderstood, so she hurriedly said, it's true, second older brother. I've already finished reading it, so you can change it for a new one. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, okay, I'll bring it back for you in the afternoon. After he finished speaking, he put the Southern Branch Fist Technique manual into his pocket and walked out with a smile. Not long after, the cute and respectable Mr. Li Jinfeng came again. This guy didn't seem to go to school and would come to teach Zhang Xiaohua every day. This made Zhang Xiaohua very depressed. Your main job is to study, okay? Why do you keep coming to teach me? Is it because you've been tortured by the teacher that you've developed psychological problems? Do you have to get it back from me? However, Li Jinfeng was actually teaching Zhang Xiaohua how to read and write, so Zhang Xiaohua carefully waited on him with a smile. In these few days, Zhang Xiaohua was in pain but happy at the same time. On one hand, she was crazily tortured by Li Jinfeng, absorbing the new words in the Shuawen Jie like a sponge. On the other hand, she very happily read the fist technique manual that Zhang Xiaohua borrowed every day. Each set of fist techniques was like a river, constantly surging in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. Unexpectedly, not a single drop of water was lost. In fact, learning this Shuawen Jie was more difficult in the first few days because every page was a new word. As she read further, Zhang Xiaohua found that the words she had learned before frequently appeared at the back. It didn't seem to be difficult. At first, she learned page by page, then 2, 3, and even 5 pages. Later, Zhang Xiaohua found the trick. In fact, there weren't many new words on each page of Shuawen Jie. The other words were used to explain this word. When Zhang Xiaohua learned all the commonly used words, she would naturally know the new word. At this time, the reading of the fist technique manual also made great progress. From Li Jinfeng's help to explain, Zhang Xiaohua read it herself. If she didn't understand something, she would ask Li Jinfeng. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua could read independently without relying on Li Jinfeng. Moreover, the words in the fist technique manual were limited. Moreover, the words that appeared in each fist technique manual were roughly the same. After reading more, she would naturally understand what they meant. As a result, Li Jinfeng, this teacher, didn't have to come every day. Instead, he came every other day. This made Zhang Xiaohua greatly relieved. After all, the days with someone supervising were tense. Zhang Xiaohua still preferred to study leisurely by herself and read freely. Zhang Xiaohu had already gone to the martial arts training center to study. At this time, he had already absorbed Zhang Xiaohua's suggestions, or perhaps it was his own understanding. If he was limited to the 6 joint fists, his own vision would be limited. Now, he was also learning other fist techniques from the martial arts masters. The third master Chu was happy to see Zhang Xiaohu's change. The third master Chu was a veteran in the Jianghu. His martial arts were naturally excellent and his views were certainly original. When he agreed to let Zhang Xiaohu enter the martial arts training center to study, it was to appease his emotions. More importantly, Zhang Xiaohu was a promising talent and had his own views on martial arts. However, although one's own views were important, it was also extremely important to integrate the strengths of various schools. The third master Chu had always been worried about what Zhang Xiaohu would do if he only practiced the 6 joint fists in the martial arts training center. How should he persuade him? Now that his worries were all gone, of course he was happy. Zhang Xiaohu's simple style and practical martial arts style were also very well received by everyone in the martial arts training center. Only the steward of the library had a bad opinion of him. Anyone who came to the library to borrow a fist technique manual must have a meticulous plan. Which one of them didn't borrow it for 10 days to half a month before returning it? Many people didn't return it for a few months. This Zhang Xiaohu, on the other hand, borrowed a book a day. Do you think this is Jin Pingmei? The fist technique manuals on this bookshelf, from top to bottom, from left to right, you change them one by one. If you want to borrow them, then so be it. You make me have to register them every day. Do you think I'm too idle? Thus, the complaint paper was placed in front of the third Master Chu's desk. When the steward entered the room, Yudei was also in the third Master Chu's room. The steward was very careful. He first glanced at Yudei and asked the third Master Chu, "The library has some matters to ask the third master. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to say it." The third Master Chu nodded and said, "There's no harm in saying it. Dei is my relative. There's no need to avoid it." The steward immediately bowed and smiled apologetically to Yudei. Yudei also returned the gesture and nodded. The steward said, "This matter isn't very big, but it's very strange. I'm afraid there's something going on. It's better to ask the third master for instructions." The third Master Chu frowned and said, "Don't talk to me about books. If you have something to say, say it." The steward immediately said, "Yes." About 20 days ago, Zhang Xiaohu, who was still a bodyguard, took your note and went to the library to borrow a fist technique manual. The third Master Chu was stunned and said, "Yes, there was such a matter." "What's wrong? You didn't borrow it from him?" The steward smiled and said, "With your note, how would I dare not to borrow it?" The third Master Chu said, "Then what's the matter? Don't tell me he wants to borrow other sword or knife manuals. If there's no need to keep it a secret, just give it to him." The steward said, "Third Master, you're mistaken. He only wanted to borrow a fist technique manual. He didn't make any other requests." The third Master Chu frowned again and said, "Then what's the problem? Don't tell me he found some ancient secret manual from the library." The steward said, "Third Master is joking. The books in the library were organized by me. There's not a single book on internal strength. How could there be an ancient item?" Yudei interrupted and said, "Uncle is just joking. Tell me, what's the matter with Zhang Xiaohu?" The steward said, "There's nothing wrong with Zhang Xiaohu borrowing a fist technique manual. But he borrows one every day and returns it on time the next morning. Then he borrows another one. He doesn't carefully select the fist technique manuals either. Instead, he borrows them from top to bottom, from left to right. He borrows them one by one. This doesn't seem logical." Chapter 102. The third Master Chu and Yudei stared blankly and said, "You're saying that Zhang Xiaohu only borrows one book a day, returns it on time the next day, and borrows another one? Or does he borrow one book at a time without a purpose?" The steward nodded in agreement. The third Master Chu pondered for a moment, but couldn't get the gist of it. He waved his hand and said, "Forget it, I'll find a time to ask him. Anyway, you're just a registrar, and the fist and blade manuals inside aren't anything special. He's also a member of the martial arts dojo, so let him read them. I know about this matter, you've done very well, so I'll pay more attention in the future. You may leave now." After the steward received the praise of the third Master Chu, he left happily. When the steward was far away, the third Master Chu asked Yudei, "What do you think?" Yudei smiled and said to the third Master Chu, "Doesn't Grandpa Chu already have a plan, and he still wants to test his nephew?" The third Master Chu smiled but didn't say anything. Yudei continued, that Zhang Xiaohu only borrows the fist manuals for his younger brother to read. Although his younger brother is naturally strong, he can't practice martial arts in this life. He's just reading those fist manuals for fun, so let him read them. Even if we let him read all the fist manuals in the library, how can these fist manuals that are widely circulated in Jianghu create a martial arts expert? If that's the case, then wouldn't it be easier for the steward to learn high-level martial arts than anyone else? If one fist manual is changed every month, then I suspect that Zhang Xiaohu's younger brother is really practicing martial arts, or is studying fist techniques. But one book a day, isn't he just blindly flipping through them to pass the time? Think about it, he's just lying in his room, bored and illiterate. Why don't we all read the books to pass the time, while he only looks at the pictures of the fist manuals? Let's just treat it as a picture album. The third Master Chu smiled and gave him a thumbs up, saying, Dai, you've improved a lot. Connecting a lot of information together to get the most logical conclusion. Not bad. Yu Dai said modestly, Uncle, you flatter me. It's just that the information is not symmetrical, which made the manager of the library suspicious. This manager is not bad, he's very careful. The third Master Chu said, Dai, you're right. What is the most important thing in Jianghu? Information. With this information, it's comparable to a peerless martial art. The two of them looked at each other and laughed out loud. They were really confident. However, was that really the case? Not necessarily. What was Zhang Xiaohua doing? He was worried about the many complete fist techniques in his mind. It was funny when he thought about it. Just a while ago, he was worried about not being able to remember a complete set of fist techniques. Now, the situation was reversed, and he was worried about so many complete fist techniques. His original goal was to learn more fist techniques and link them together to form a complete set of fist techniques. Now that he had memorized so many complete fist techniques, how could he link them all together? He was worried. Now that Xiaohua's injury had improved, he wouldn't cry out in pain even if he moved his arm occasionally. At this moment, he was sitting on the Kong bed, staring at the roof in a daze. He had finished reading a new fist manual, so he threw it aside. Zhang Xiaohu was still practicing his fist techniques. He was really a model of never leaving his fists and never leaving his mouth. After thinking for a long time, he couldn't come up with a good idea. Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to give up temporarily. His attention shifted from the roof to Zhang Xiaohu's fist techniques. Suddenly, he was stunned. His heart skipped a beat, and he cried out, Second brother, why aren't you practicing the 6-he fist anymore? When Zhang Xiaohu heard Zhang Xiaohua calling him, he stopped. He wiped his sweat and said with a smile, I stopped practicing the 6-he fist a few days ago. You just didn't pay attention to it. When I heard what you said last time, I felt that other fist techniques might not be as good as the 6-he fist, but it can be used as a reference. Zhang Xiaohua said happily, Second brother's martial arts have improved again. I'm so envious. How can my fist technique improve? It's really a headache. Oh right, your fist technique looked very familiar. I think it's the South Branch fist. Zhang Xiaohu was stunned and said, How did you know? Then he realized, oh, you've seen this fist technique manual before. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, the second book you gave me was the South Branch Fist Technique Manual. Of course I was impressed. Zhang Xiaohu said, there's a martial arts master in the martial arts center who is proficient in this South Branch Fist. Also, I heard him say that this South Branch Fist is more defensive than offensive, so I learned it from him. Oh, so it's like that. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a while and said, Second brother, then can you practice it from beginning to end? I want to see it slowly. Zhang Xiaohu said, of course I can. Just watch. After saying that, he got into a fighting stance and started practicing. After a few moves, he asked, how's this speed? Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, slow down a bit more. Thus, Zhang Xiaohu slowed down again and slowly practiced the South Branch Fist. But when he finished, Zhang Xiaohua's frown deepened and her face was especially confused. Zhang Xiaohu couldn't help but ask, what's wrong, Xiaohua? Is the fist technique I practice different from the one recorded in the manual? Zhang Xiaohua said puzzledly, second brother, it's not that it's different, it's that it's too similar. Zhang Xiaohu said strangely, it's the same, why is it not good? Zhang Xiaohua said, second brother, you don't understand. Actually, I don't understand either. Do you still remember that the fist techniques I learned in the past were rarely the same as what others taught? They were all slightly different from what others taught. But why is it that what I learned from a fist manual is exactly the same as the fist manual? I have a very strange feeling. Zhang Xiaohu said, it's really strange that you're learning fist techniques. Who doesn't learn the same fist technique as a manual? You actually hope that it's different. Then what do you feel? Zhang Xiaohua said with a bitter smile, I don't know either. In short, I just feel that something is wrong. And, if it's not right then it's not right. We'll talk about it tomorrow. It's already late today, so let's go to bed early. Zhang Xiaohu said unhappily. He didn't take Zhang Xiaohua's words to heart. After Zhang Xiaohu blew out the oil lamp, Zhang Xiaohua still didn't feel sleepy. He stared in the dark and carefully searched for the discordant feeling in his mind until midnight. In the next few days, Zhang Xiaohua still couldn't figure out what was wrong. He simply threw this feeling aside and concentrated on memorizing the fist technique and reading the basic course, Shuawen Jie Zi, painstakingly. Under Li Jinfeng's wise decision, Zhang Xiaohua was already able to independently study this most basic initiatory book. He had already learned half of the thick book. Seeing this, Li Jinfeng secretly curled his lips and said to himself, this guy is really not ordinary. He can actually memorize half of Shuawen Jie Zi. If the scholars of the academy heard this, wouldn't they be so ashamed that they would jump into a well? But, should I also jump into a well? Of course not. If it weren't for me, the wise teacher, how could this guy display his potential? I am the one who deserves the most credit. Actually, Zhang Xiaohua was the one who was studying Shuawen Jie Zi at this time. Li Jinfeng had already given Zhang Xiaohua more responsibility by showing him some of the books that he had read in the academy. He even said shamelessly, these are all learned by the initiatory children. When Zhang Xiaohua retorted that he didn't see any students learning this in the Guizhuang house, Li Jinfeng always sneered and said, in the Guizhuang house, it was the Guizhuang house's standard of education. In Pingyang City, it was Pingyang City's standard of education. Many people racked their brains to send their children to Pingyang City to study. Why? It's because the distribution of educational resources is not balanced. It's because the standard of education in Pingyang City is high. Not to mention that there are many schools in Pingyang City that recruit more local students, the initiatory children here have more opportunities to study in better schools. Even the initiatory books are not available in other places. You have the chance to study, but you don't focus on studying. Instead, you are here thinking about other things. Think about when you were young and didn't have any books to study. Think about the children in other places who want to study like you are now. Don't you feel embarrassed to not study hard? Zhang Xiaohua was struck down by these words. He thought about his tragic childhood without any education. Under Li Jinfeng's urging, he studied even harder. He was just short of hanging his head from a beam. Of course, this was because Li Jinfeng saw that he was injured and did not do anything to him. With effort, there would be gains. In an inhumane learning environment, Zhang Xiaohua had achieved exceptionally good results. Although he did not take any examinations, from the way he usually quoted classics and idioms when he talked to Li Jinfeng, it was hard to tell that he was illiterate just a month or two ago. Now, his childish face shone with a scholarly aura. His dark eyes shone with wisdom from time to time. Anyone who saw him would think that he was an accomplished student. These were just some of the appearances that Li Jinfeng and Zhang Xiaohu knew. As for his achievements in the study of fist manuals, it was even more incredible. At first, Zhang Xiaohu borrowed one book at a time. Later, the manager of the library showed some fatigue and asked him to borrow 2 books at a time. He thought that this could delay him for 2 days, but who knew that Zhang Xiaohu would return the books the next day? The manager was completely speechless. He thought that since this matter had already been reported to the third Master Chu, and since the third Master Chu did not say anything, then he could only be unlucky. So be it. If he wanted to record more, then so be it. He would just treat it as if he had taken too much rest in the past few years. This year, he paid a little interest. He would not be long-winded and let Zhang Xiaohu borrow 1 book or 2, but he would return them once a day. In fact, Zhang Xiaohu himself was also puzzled. At first, he thought that Zhang Xiaohua was really reading the fist manuals and memorizing them seriously. After all, he had discussed the South Branch fist with him. But later, he only looked at one of the fist manuals when it was almost dark. When it was time to light the lamp, he threw it aside and did not even move his hands and feet. Yes, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to move his hands and feet, but he had to be able to move his hands and feet first. How was this reading a fist manual? It was more like reading a picture album to pass the time. When he started to read 2 books, Zhang Xiaohua continued to read one book after another. After he finished reading, he threw the book on the Kong. Zhang Xiaohu confirmed his guess. His younger brother was definitely killing time, or looking for a fist technique suitable for himself to practice. He would practice it after his injury was healed. Originally, he wanted to say a few words to get him to be a little more serious. But when he thought about how Zhang Xiaohua would discover that he was unable to practice martial arts after his injury was healed, Zhang Xiaohu could not open his mouth. Forget it, let him be. Zhang Xiaohu thought to himself, anyway, I'm just going to the library to borrow some books. I'll just treat it as a form of exercise. If he can read like this, he can also be considered to be literate. It would be best if he gets bored after reading for a while and doesn't want to practice martial arts anymore. Then he can fulfill Li Jinfeng's wish and become a top scholar. That would be the best. However, when he thought about how Zhang Xiaohua would discover that he was unable to practice martial arts after a while, how should he comfort him? Just thinking about it gave him a headache. Time flew by, and under everyone's care, Zhang Xiaohua's injuries slowly improved. The doctor in the medical hall also came regularly to change his medicine and check on the recovery of his bones. When the weather turned cold, the injury on his wrist was mostly healed, but the fractures on his palm and fingers were still recovering normally. It was just that Zhang Xiaohua occasionally moved his hands, but it didn't hurt too much. Due to Zhang Xiaohu's meticulous care, Zhang Xiaohua's bones didn't grow out of shape or crooked, which made the doctor very satisfied. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua's injuries were extremely dangerous this time. After receiving the 3rd Master Chu's instructions, the doctor didn't say it explicitly. Yu Dai's purple sand palm's internal energy was extraordinary, and if he hit Zhang Xiaohua's fist with full force, then Zhang Xiaohua's fist would definitely be shattered by the internal energy, and there would be no possibility of it being reconnected. Then Zhang Xiaohua's right hand would really be crippled. Yu Dai had only used Zhang Xiaohua's fist to retract his strength, and only used 20 to 30% of his internal energy to hit Zhang Xiaohua's fist. The result was that the bones on his wrist, fingers, and palm were shattered, and not only the joints were broken. Therefore, even though Zhang Xiaohua's hand wasn't completely crippled, he couldn't use any strength. If he used too much strength, he would definitely break the bones that grew back. Therefore, he couldn't say that he was practicing martial arts. Therefore, when Zhang Xiaohua asked the doctor again when he would be able to practice martial arts, the doctor frowned. After thinking for a while, he said, "Wait a little longer. When the weather is completely cold, you might be able to practice martial arts. However, you have to remember that in these 3 to 5 years, regardless of whether it's practicing martial arts or working, you can't use too much strength. Otherwise, your bones will break again." When Zhang Xiaohua heard that he would be able to practice martial arts when the weather was cold, he was extremely happy. As for not being able to use strength for 3 to 5 years, he didn't hear anything about it. He just lightly gestured by himself. Therefore, he looked forward to the cold weather every day. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaohu was naturally very happy when he saw that his younger brother was getting better day by day. However, there was another matter that troubled him. It had been more than 4 months since he left the Guizhuang house, but he had not sent any news back home. Thinking about how his parents were waiting anxiously at home, Zhang Xiaohu was very anxious. When he first arrived, he and his younger brother did not find a place to stay and did not think of sending a message back home. Then, his younger brother got injured and he could not let his family know about it. Now that his younger brother's injuries had healed, it was time for him to inform his family that he was safe. However, he had no relatives or friends in Pingyang City and did not know anyone else. He did not know who had returned to Lu Town. How should he report this news? With the recovery of Zhang Xiaohua's injuries, his learning had entered a new stage. His personal tutor, Li Jinfeng, no longer came every day. Now, he only appeared once every few days. Every time he came, he would bring a lot of enlightenment books for Zhang Xiaohua to read. He would also ask Zhang Xiaohua questions and answer them one by one. In fact, other than reading, Zhang Xiaohua had also been practicing writing. Every time Zhang Xiaohua would write for Li Jinfeng. Every time Li Jinfeng asked about Zhang Xiaohua's reading progress and saw that his handwriting was becoming smoother and more mature, he would smack his lips and refuse to comment. Zhang Xiaohua did not know what he meant. She only felt that it might not be good. Brother Li was embarrassed to say that he would be more diligent in his studies in the future. But Zhang Xiaohua did not know that every time Li Jinfeng came to supervise Zhang Xiaohua's studies, it was because his confidence had been defeated by Zhang Xiaohua. Every time he saw Zhang Xiaohua's great progress, he could not help but shout to the sky, "Since Yu is born, why is Liang born? Could it be that this was the legendary genius?" This was really disappointing for normal people. And what made Li Jinfeng feel the most heartache and excitement was that Zhang Xiaohua had already flipped through the basic tutorial of Shuawen Jie Zi thoroughly. What kind of people were these? Li Jinfeng did not dare to imagine. A person who memorized a dictionary could only be a fierce and powerful person. And when Li Jinfeng asked how to memorize it, Zhang Xiaohua had a, of course, look on her face. It was indeed difficult at the beginning, but later on, the words in front of her were rearranged. She just had to memorize it carefully. At the last stage, she read dozens of pages together. Li Jinfeng flipped open Shuawen Jie Zi again to confirm that he had not taken the wrong book. Of course, he was also very happy that his method was correct. He imagined that if he were to lose his job in the future, he could find a kindergarten teacher. This was a part-time job that seemed to have a bright future. And Zhang Xiaohua was completely unaware of Li Jinfeng's thoughts. He only thought that he had done something that ordinary children in Pingyang City would do. There was no joy in it. His fondness was deeply hidden in the fist manual. Zhang Xiaohua had already finished borrowing all the fist manuals in the library. That was to say, Zhang Xiaohua had read through all the fist manuals in the Lotus Escort Agency's martial arts training hall. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua had already memorized more than 100 sets of fist techniques that were circulating in the pugilistic world. Every set was a complete version with no missing parts. Zhang Xiaohua's memory during this period of time did not disappoint Zhang Xiaohua. Now, Zhang Xiaohua no longer constantly recalled the fist manuals from the day before when he woke up. This was because he knew that as long as he was willing, that little figure would be able to show him the fist manual that he wanted to know from start to finish at any time. Other than the fact that he could not practice, Zhang Xiaohua was very satisfied with his current life. He had 3 meals a day. Yu Dai did not reduce the quality of Zhang Xiaohua's meals just because his injuries were getting better. This made Zhang Xiaohua have a very good impression of him. Occasionally, Yu Dai would come to visit Zhang Xiaohua in the room. Zhang Xiaohua also had a pleasant expression and was not as resentful as before. Now that he thought about it, Yu Dai had indeed been careless. Although the consequences of this carelessness were serious, he seemed to have heard from Li Jinfeng that these rich playboys all had these small problems. Compared to others, at least his attitude and actions of apologizing were much better. For example, people like Lu Zhen whom Zhang Xiaohua had always held a grudge against. With this comparison, Zhang Xiaohua naturally did not hate Yu Dai anymore. Not to mention that he had actually read countless fist manuals because of his injuries. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to laugh even in his dreams. Chapter 103. The weather was gradually getting colder. It was a good autumn. By now, Zhang Xiaohua had already finished reading all of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency's fist manuals, but hadn't read any of the blade or sword manuals. There was once when Zhang Xiaohua helped him return the last fist manual and conveniently took a sword manual. When the library's manager was registering it, Zhang Xiaohua remembered that he had only begged the third Master Chu to borrow the library's fist manuals. He nervously watched the manager register it, but who knew that the manager didn't even ask much and was only surprised that he had only borrowed one manual this time. This allowed Zhang Xiaohu to let out a sigh of relief. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't seem to have the aptitude to learn sword manuals. He flipped through it no less than 10 times, but still couldn't understand the contents. This made him feel very strange. He could recognize the words and understand the sword moves, but he just couldn't understand it and couldn't remember it. Thus, he could only throw it to the side. From then on, Zhang Xiaohu no longer went to the library to borrow books. This made the busy manager feel very strange. His idle days made him feel very uncomfortable. Zhang Xiaohua spent most of his time learning from Li Jinfeng. He only closed his eyes in the evening to recall his own fist techniques. On this day, Zhang Xiaohua sat on the Kong and flipped through some of the books that Li Jinfeng had given him. Just as he was reading with interest, Zhang Xiaohu pushed open the door and came in. Zhang Xiaohua happily said, "Second brother, why are you back so early today?" Zhang Xiaohu's smile was a bit forced as he said, "I practiced fist techniques in the martial arts hall all morning today. I'm a bit tired." Also, speaking to hear, his tone was a bit hesitant. Zhang Xiaohua saw that her second brother didn't continue and felt very strange. She said, "What's wrong? Second brother, did something happen in the martial arts hall?" Zhang Xiaohu lowered his head and thought for a moment before saying, "It's like this. Xiaohua, the dojo is going to teach me Nigong mantras tomorrow, so they told me to come back early to rest and prepare for tomorrow's work." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was so happy that she almost jumped off the Kong bed and said, "That's great, second brother. I didn't think that the dojo would teach you internal strength so soon. I really have to congratulate you. I thought it would take at least a few years. Ha ha ha, when you learn it, you can teach me. I can also learn the Nigong mantra. Let Yu Luan be envious of me. I am Superman Xiaohua." Before Zhang Xiaohua could finish rejoicing, he suddenly remembered the expression on Zhang Xiaohu's face when he first entered the room. Immediately, he knew that things were not as simple as he thought. There seemed to be a problem. As expected, there was no joy on Zhang Xiaohu's face. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and asked, "Second brother, what's going on?" "It's probably because you can't teach me." Zhang Xiaohu nodded affirmatively and said, "Yes, Xiaohua. Today, the third Master Chu told me that he was going to teach me the Nigong mantra tomorrow. I asked him if I could teach you after I learned it. But the third Master Chu said that the Nigong mantra was a secret of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. Only the people of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency could learn it with special permission. Don't look at how many people in the dojo are learning it. Those who could get the third Master Chu to agree to learn the Nigong mantra were few and far between. Heh, you don't know, but Xiaohua, the third Master Chu also knows how to form cliques and factions. He just had to hint to me that I should join their camp. I don't even know who this escort agency belongs to or what factions they belong to. Of course I was happy to agree. People say that they can enjoy the shade of a big tree behind them. I'm not so stupid as to not accept this olive branch." Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of disappointment as he pursed his lips and said, "What kind of lousy Nigong mantra is this? It's so secretive. How about, second brother, you secretly teach me and I won't tell anyone? How about it?" Zhang Xiaohu smiled wryly and said, "It would be great if it were that simple." The third Master Chu also said that Nigong mantra isn't like fist techniques or blade techniques. The practice of Nigong mantra isn't something that can be done in a day. Only after practicing to a very deep level can one have the qualifications to teach others. If I teach you right after I start practicing, then to be honest, I'll be harming you and you'll really go crazy. If I teach you after I've practiced to a certain level, you'll probably have other opportunities by then. I think the third Master Chu's words make a lot of sense. What do you think? Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua spread out her hands and said, "Second brother, how would I know? I've never practiced Nigong mantra before. Sigh, forget it. If you don't want to teach me, then don't teach me. I don't care about this lousy Nigong mantra anyway. I haven't even learned my own fist techniques yet." Zhang Xiaohu didn't believe her and continued to ask, "You're really not going to pester me to teach you anymore?" Zhang Xiaohua giggled and said, forget it, really forget it. However, you still have to tell me some of your cultivation experiences, okay? Zhang Xiaohu rubbed his chin and said, about this, I don't think the third Master Chu mentioned it before. It should be okay. Zhang Xiaohua clapped and said, then it's settled. I want to see what kind of Nigong I can learn in the future. I want to see if it's you or me who's better at it. Zhang Xiaohu's heart ached and said, of course it's you who's better. I have a premonition. Actually, the third Master Chu still had some words that Zhang Xiaohu didn't tell Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's right hand was already crippled. Not only could she not do heavy work or carry heavy objects, but the meridians in her hand might have been destroyed. Without the meridians in her hand, how could she have complete Nigong mantra? In other words, Zhang Xiaohua might not be able to cultivate any Nigong mantra. Thus, Zhang Xiaohu spent most of his time in the room practicing Nigong mantra, sitting cross-legged on the Kong bed with his 5 centers facing the sky. His eyes focused on his nose, and his nose focused on his heart as he cultivated Nigong mantra. Zhang Xiaohua looked at her second brother's appearance and was curious and amused. Could it be that this clay bodhisattva was cultivating Nigong mantra? It was really strange. However, she knew that Zhang Xiaohu was also a beginner. Even if she asked, he wouldn't be able to explain clearly. Thus, she shut her mouth and carefully watched from the side. She was afraid that she would make a sound and disturb her second brother. Actually, cultivating Nigong mantra required silence. Only by remaining silent in one's body would one be able to create Nigong mantra. Most beginners would use a quiet room to practice. Zhang Xiaohu also used a quiet room when he was at the martial arts dojo. When he returned to the room, he knew that it wasn't suitable for him to cultivate Nigong mantra. However, he was used to working hard and didn't have any room for improvement in Nigong mantra. Of course, it was fine if he was the only one in the room, but if there was someone else, it would be dangerous. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua was injured and couldn't move. She also knew that she shouldn't disturb her second brother, so nothing happened. Today, Zhang Xiaohu went to the martial arts dojo to practice, leaving Zhang Xiaohua in the room. She was sitting on the Kong bed, bored. Someone knocked on the door and waited for someone to come in. It was Mr. Li Jinfeng. Li Jinfeng smiled as he entered the room with some books in his hands. He had been busy with his homework recently and hadn't been here for a long time. First, he asked about Zhang Xiaohua's injuries. When he heard that she had recovered, he was very happy. Then, he chatted with Zhang Xiaohua about the books he left behind last time. Zhang Xiaohua was also reading very seriously. She had a lot of questions in her heart, so the two of them talked very lively. Some questions even caused the two of them to fiercely defend themselves. As the two of them were talking, someone knocked on the door again. Zhang Xiaohua was very strange. No one came to her second brother's room. Why were there 2 people knocking on the door today? He raised his voice and said, "Come in." However, the door didn't open and no one came in. Zhang Xiaohua was even more confused. Who was it? He shouted again, "There's someone in the room. Come in." The person still didn't come in. Li Jinfeng looked at Zhang Xiaohua and walked to the door. When he opened the door, he saw a young woman standing outside. He cupped his hands and said, "Miss, who are you looking for?" The woman said strangely, "Did I find the wrong room? Is this where Zhang Xiaohu lives?" Li Jinfeng saw this and hurriedly said, "Miss, you found the right room. This is where Zhang Xiaohu lives, but he's not here for the time being." "Oh, I see." The woman's expression relaxed and said, "Then is his brother Zhang Xiaohua here?" "I'm from Huanxi Manor. I came to see him." Li Jinfeng heard and said, "He's here. Zhang Xiaohua is sitting on the Kong bed. He's injured. The doctor said that it's a critical period and he should try not to get off the Kong bed, so he hasn't come out. Please come in." The woman said, "Was the person who spoke just now Zhang Xiaohua?" Li Jinfeng said strangely, "Yes, he was the one who asked you to come in." Haven't you heard him speak before? The woman said, his voice doesn't sound right. After saying this, Li Jinfeng invited the woman into the room. After the woman entered the room, Zhang Xiaohua saw who it was and was extremely happy. He shouted, Qiu Tong's sister, why are you here? As he said this, he was about to jump off the Kong bed. Qiu Tong took a few steps forward and pressed on his shoulder, saying, Zhang Xiaohua, don't get off the Kong bed. Didn't your friend say that the doctor didn't want you to move? Quickly sit down. Zhang Xiaohua said happily, it's okay, Qiu Tong's sister. I've been playing under the Kong bed a few days ago. It's just that the doctor saw me and said that this is the last period and I have to be very careful. I don't want to waste all my efforts. That's why he asked me to guard this Kong bed. After saying this, he was about to swing his arm. Li Jinfeng saw this and hurriedly ran over. He held him down and said, don't force yourself. You can play in a few days. Seeing that the two of them were concerned about him, Zhang Xiaohua chuckled and sat back on the Kong bed. He said to Qiu Tong's sister, this is my teacher. His name is Li Jinfeng. Qiu Tong was puzzled again and asked, teacher. Li Jinfeng blushed and said, Miss Qiu Tong, don't listen to Zhang Xiaohua's nonsense. I'm just a student who came to Pingyang City with him. I hit it off with him and his brother at first sight. Recently, I saw that he was injured, so I came to take a look. After that, he briefly told Zhang Xiaohua about how he taught her how to read. In the end, he said, it's nothing. Xiaohua is very smart. It's just a piece of cake for me. I can't be considered an enlightened teacher. Qiu Tong was happy to hear this. She said, you taught Xiaohua how to read, so naturally you're her teacher. This title is fixed. However, if you treat him as a younger brother, he can call you brotherly. That's fine. Oh right, Zhang Xiaohua, you can actually write now. That's amazing. When you're better, you have to write for me. Zhang Xiaohua heard this and was about to stand up. She said, I write with my left hand. Qiu Tong's sister, I can write for you now. When Qiu Tong heard this, she suddenly realized that she was using her left hand. She quickly said, no need, there's no need to rush. You can do it in the future. However, now that Zhang Xiaohua had a chance to show off, she wanted to share something fun with others. She insisted on writing now. Hence, Li Jinfeng put the brush and ink on the Kong bed. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua's few words were as good as Li Jinfeng's praise. Qiu Tong was very happy for Zhang Xiaohua and kept praising him. Zhang Xiaohua's smile became even brighter. After asking about the recent situation, Qiu Tong then explained the purpose of her visit. A few months ago, Third Uncle Chu sent someone to the village head to say that you were injured at the escort agency and wanted to stay there to recuperate. I wanted to ask the village head to let you return to the village to recuperate. The people in the escort agency are all men. How would they know how to take care of you? However, the village head said that you were considered a member of the agency. Moreover, your brother is here. If you were to recuperate in the village, your brother would miss you very much. Hence, I didn't send you to the village. After that, I went to the south to settle some matters. I just returned recently and saw that you still hadn't returned to the village. Since I had some matters to attend to in Pingyang City, I decided to visit you. Since your injuries have healed, a few more days won't make a difference. You might as well recuperate in the escort agency before returning. Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, elder sister Qiu Tong, and elder sister village head, you guys are so good to me. I've only been working at the village for a month and I've already stopped. I'm still recuperating here. You guys must have delayed all your work at the village. I'm really sorry. Qiu Tong smiled and said, it's all right. We all treat you as a cute little brother. Although the village head hasn't met you, she is a kind and soft-hearted person. You came out at such a young age and even got injured. How could she blame you? Moreover, Lu Er came back a month after you got injured. You didn't delay any work at the village. Ah! Zhang Xiaohua exclaimed. Lu Er came back. Then can I still return to the village? Don't tell me you guys don't want me anymore. Qiu Tong smiled and said, that won't happen. Xiaohua, third Uncle Chu has already spoken to the village head. You can stay at Huanxi village in the future and don't have to go anywhere. Moreover, there are many things to do at the village. Even if you don't do Lu Er's work, you can still do other things. The village head will definitely want you. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua patted her chest and said, that was close. I got injured and no one wants me anymore. That would be a huge loss. I was lucky. Qiu Tong glanced at Li Jinfeng and said, it's all thanks to your brother Li. Actually, you are no longer the same as before. You can read and write so well. You can live anywhere. Of course, in the village, you have the protection of the village head. Of course, it's much better than outside. If the village head knows that you can read, she will be very happy. That's why you have to thank this teacher of yours. Zhang Xiaohua said seriously, Sister Qiu Tong is right. Brother Li is so good to me. I really have nothing to say. It's just that I can't repay you. I can only wait for the future. Li Jinfeng evaded and said, Xiaohua, you don't have to be like this. Being able to teach you is also satisfying my desire to be a teacher. Being able to show off in front of others as a teacher is also an opportunity you gave me. I won't thank you and you won't thank me. Don't even mention the word repay in the future. Qiu Tong looked at Li Jinfeng and felt that this person's words were quite interesting. He didn't seem like the vulgar people she usually met. Then, she said to Zhang Xiaohua, Xiaohua, I haven't seen you in a few months. Why has your voice changed? It used to be a little soft, but now it's a little hoarse and low. Could it be that this injury and the internal injuries in your body haven't been treated yet? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She raised her head and carefully said, Then, she said in confusion, there's no change, Sister Qiu Tong. Qiu Tong smiled and said, if there's no change, why didn't I hear it when we were outside? Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and said, the doctor in the clinic didn't say that there was an internal injury. I heard from Yu Dai that his internal energy didn't rush into my meridians. He only injured my fist. At this moment, Li Jinfeng interrupted and said, well, Miss Qiu Tong, young people will change their voices when they are in their teens. In the past, it can be called a child's voice. It's very sharp. Xiaohua is changing her voice now and it's a little hoarse. After a while, her voice will be fixed and she won't be able to speak as loudly as before. However, Xiaohua's voice sounds pretty good. It's quite magnetic. Qiu Tong smiled and said, Mr. Li is really knowledgeable. You even know these things. Li Jinfeng's face was slightly red. He said humbly, these are all things that I read in books. I only dabbled a little and understood them after putting them into practice. I don't dare to claim credit. Qiu Tong's impression of him improved when she saw him like this. Then, Qiu Tong asked again, Xiaohua, when will your injury recover? Let me calculate the time. The next time I come to Pingyang City for business, I'll bring you back with me. Zhang Xiaohua thought about it and said, actually, we can go back now. However, I don't think the doctor at the escort agency will agree. I think it should be fine in about 10 days. When Qiu Tong heard this, she said readily, all right then, I'll come and fetch you in 10 days. Anyway, the manor has many things to do in Pingyang City. Even if I don't come, they'll send someone else. However, Li Jinfeng said, Miss Qiu Tong, Xiaohua's injury may not recover in time. Why don't we wait for him to recover? I'll send him over with his second brother. That way, you won't have to worry about coming over to fetch him. Qiu Tong felt that it made sense. She said, that's good too. If I can make it in 10 days, I'll come and fetch him. If not, you can send Xiaohua over to see the environment of the manor. Don't worry about Xiaohua. After speaking, they chatted for a while more before Qiu Tong took her leave. Zhang Xiaohua insisted on getting off the Kong bed. She walked her to the door and watched reluctantly as Qiu Tong turned into the corridor. When Qiu Tong was far away, Zhang Xiaohua turned and went back into the house. When she entered the house, she realized that Li Jinfeng did not follow her in. She turned around and saw that this fellow was still staring blankly at the empty corridor. He seemed to be thinking about something. Zhang Xiaohua shouted, "Brother Li, what are you doing? Did you meet someone you know again?" Li Jinfeng turned around and smiled at Zhang Xiaohua. He said, "What do you mean by someone I know? Everyone in this escort agency is a martial artist. Not many of them will take a liking to a weak scholar like me. How can I make friends?" As he spoke, he held Zhang Xiaohua's right hand and carefully helped him onto the Kong bed. "Please add it to your collection." "Thank you." Chapter 104. He waited for Zhang Xiaohua to settle down before asking with a grin, "Xiaohua, are you very familiar with this Qiu Tong?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Of course, it was big sister Qiu Tong who told me to go to Huanxi Mountain Villa. Of course we're very familiar with each other." "Then how old is Qiu Tong? Where is she from? Is there anyone else in her family? Also, is she married?" Li Jinfeng asked a long list of questions in a row. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and mumbled, "We are familiar with each other, but we've only met 2 or 3 times. I'm really not too sure about the questions you're asking. Why don't I help you ask big sister Qiu Tong the next time I see her?" Li Jinfeng put his index finger in the middle of his mouth and made a sh sound, saying, "It's too embarrassing to ask her these things in person. When you have time, you can find a chance to slowly ask her. However, you have to be careful not to let her know that it's me who wants to ask, okay?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked, "Why? It's what you want to know in the first place. Why do you have to be so secretive?" Li Jinfeng clasped his hands behind his back and looked out the window, saying, "Guangguan Jujiu, in the continent of the river, a gentle and graceful lady is a good match for a gentleman. Xiaohua, you're still young. When you grow up, you'll know for yourself." Zhang Xiaohua was confused and asked, "Where did this saying come from? Why haven't I heard of it before?" Li Jinfeng smiled and said, "Xiaohua, there are so many books in this world that we can barely read 10% of them in our entire lives. That's why there's no end to learning, but there's a limit to my heart. Only by reading more and reading more books can I keep up with the pace of the times." This saying is from a legendary song in a book. When you have the chance to read it, you'll naturally know the specific meaning. Even if I tell you now, you won't understand. Zhang Xiaohua pursed her lips, but she agreed with him in her heart. She had only learned for a few days, but Li Jinfeng had been studying for decades. Of course, his knowledge and experience could not be compared to hers. At this stage, whatever he said was the truth. There was no way she could argue with him. They were not on the same level after all. The two of them chatted for a while. Li Jinfeng would intentionally or unintentionally ask Zhang Xiaohua about Qiu Tong. Unfortunately, ever since Zhang Xiaohua arrived at Huanxi Manor, she had not seen Qiu Tong once. All she knew were some trivial things that she heard from others. Even so, these were still very interesting to Li Jinfeng. Later on, Li Jinfeng suddenly thought of something and asked Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, you've only been in Pingyang City for a few days. How did you suddenly get to know Qiu Tong? I've been in Pingyang City for much longer than you. Why didn't I have this opportunity?" Zhang Xiaohua recounted how she met Qiu Tong. Li Jinfeng sighed and said, "You even got such a good opportunity. If only it were me. I would definitely be able to bring that thief to Qiu Tong." Zhang Xiaohua pursed her lips again and said, "If it were you, where would my rice bowl be? A guy who only has the opposite sex but no friends. You even have to scheme against someone's livelihood. Moreover, with your character, how can you catch a thief? If it weren't for me that day, you wouldn't have known that your money pouch had been stolen." When Li Jinfeng heard this, his eyes couldn't help but light up. He said, in that case, Chiu Tong and I both met a thief. It was also because of you that our money pouches didn't go missing. It seems that Chiu Tong and I are really fated. Looking at Li Jinfeng's extremely narcissistic look, Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes. At this point, even if Zhang Xiaohua thought with her heels, she knew that Li Jinfeng was very interested in Chiu Tong. However, this was the first time Zhang Xiaohua had seen someone like Li Jinfeng who forcefully pulled fate together. It was probably the first time in Pingyang City as well. If this was also fate, then Yu Lao's red string was too worthless. At night, Zhang Xiaohu returned. Zhang Xiaohua told him about what happened today. Zhang Xiaohu was very happy and felt as if a rock had been lifted from his heart. Previously, the third Master Chu had promised Huanxi Manor. However, as long as Zhang Xiaohua didn't receive news from the manor, he naturally wouldn't feel at ease. He had also met Chiu Tong before. She was the one who brought Zhang Xiaohua to Huanxi Manor. Zhang Xiaohu still believed Chiu Tong's words very much. For the next few days, although Zhang Xiaohua was still lying on the Kong bed to recuperate, she felt as if a cat was scratching her heart. She didn't want to stay on the Kong bed anymore and kept thinking about returning to the manor. She wasn't even in the mood to read the books that Li Jinfeng brought her. Zhang Xiaohu was also a little frustrated. After all, the cultivation of internal energy was not as easy to see the results as practicing fist techniques. He had been studying internal energy for such a long time, but he still hadn't reached the threshold. Naturally, he couldn't calm down. Therefore, when the two brothers were in the room, they couldn't help but stare at each other. After a period of boredom, Zhang Xiaohua asked Zhang Xiaohu, second brother, why don't I go back to Huanxi Manor first? After staying in the escort agency for a few months, I haven't even left this room much. I'm tired of it. No matter what, I know some people in the manor. It's also a big place, like our Guizhuang house. Anyway, I can move now, so I'm not afraid of hurting my bones again. I can't move anymore. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and nodded, that's good. It's not interesting to see you being absent-minded here. Tomorrow, I'll find the doctor in the medical hall to take a final look and then send you back. That's right, I heard you say that the carriage company has carriages. After the doctor is done, we'll find that carriage company and get a carriage to send you back. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, second brother, I heard from my roommate, Ma Jing, that this carriage doesn't seem cheap. I think I'd better walk back myself. After all, I haven't moved for a long time. It's good to walk. That's right, this is my monthly salary for working in Huanxi Manor. Take it first and give it to father and mother when you have time. As she spoke, Zhang Xiaohua took out the money that she had been carrying for several months and handed it to Zhang Xiaohu. She continued, the main purpose of coming to the escort agency this time was to see you and give this money to you. In the end, I ended up staying here for several months. It's really fate that makes fools of people. Zhang Xiaohu looked at the money in his younger brother's small hands and felt sour in his heart. He didn't know what to say. After a long time, he finally opened his mouth, Xiaohua, take this money first. It's inconvenient to be outside compared to being at home. You're alone in the manor and I'm not by your side. There are many places where you need money. You should also buy more things for yourself. Father and mother at home want you to be healthy and live a good life. You can only take care of yourself first and then consider giving it to them. Zhang Xiaohua insisted on putting the money into Zhang Xiaohu's hands, saying, it's all right, second brother. I don't leave the manor. Everything is ready-made there. I don't need to buy food or clothes myself. What else do I need to buy? Besides, this is the first time I've received my monthly allowance. It's very important and has a very important meaning. I must give it to father and mother. They've worked very hard to raise me. This money is a symbol of my growth and is also my filial piety to them. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, this Li Jinfeng is really not bad. He's taught you to be refined and refined. When you speak, there are many reasons. Since you've said so, I'll take it first. When there's a chance, I'll have someone else bring it back. However, you've just recovered from a serious illness, so it's best that you don't tire yourself out. I've already received my monthly allowance from the escort agency for several months. I'll pay for you to take that carriage back. However, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't willing and tried to refuse. Zhang Xiaohu felt sorry for his younger brother and persisted. Even when they were about to go to sleep, there was still no result. The next day, early in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua had Zhang Xiaohu bring her to the medical hall and let the old physician take a look. The physician carefully looked at her and then wrapped her in a bandage. He smiled and said to Zhang Xiaohua, "The bones are growing very neatly and have recovered very well." Moreover, the recovery time was unexpectedly short. "It seems that you've been stifled for a long time. From today onwards, you can move your right hand freely. However, you mustn't use too much strength at first. For the time being, it's just a normal extension and contraction. Remember, don't use your right hand to lift heavy objects. When you're working, try your best to use your left hand. Oh right, try your best to use your right hand when you're eating." Zhang Xiaohua anxiously asked, "Then when can I practice boxing?" The physician looked at Zhang Xiaohua's expectant gaze and then looked at Zhang Xiaohu. He kindly said, "You can move your right hand first. After a few days when this bandage is removed, you can try to practice boxing. However, you must remember that practicing boxing is only to strengthen your body. Being competitive is not the purpose of practicing boxing. In the future, you must try your best not to compete with others or cause trouble." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. What was the point of practicing boxing if he wasn't going to fight? However, he still nodded as if he didn't fully understand. Zhang Xiaohua happily followed Zhang Xiaohu back. As he walked, he eagerly wanted to move his arm. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly stopped him and said, "Although the physician has already allowed you to move, there should be a limit. Don't move so much. Try to move as little as possible first. Wait a while before practicing your boxing." "Oh right, I think that young Master Li's words make sense. Why don't you read more books? Maybe practicing is more interesting." Zhang Xiaohu still tried to persuade Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly walked quietly and replied disapprovingly, "Practicing is boring. Although those books look interesting, if you study them every day, it's boring. I still want to practice boxing and practice internal strength." Zhang Xiaohu said, What internal strength? Let's not talk about how you don't know where you can learn internal strength techniques. I've been practicing this internal strength technique for so long and haven't made any progress. Practicing martial arts is too difficult." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Second brother, didn't you always say that as long as you work hard, an iron pestle can be ground into a needle? Why are you saying such discouraging words now?" Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly and said, "That depends on what kind of iron it is. Let's not talk about it anymore. Maybe when the time comes, you'll know how difficult it is. If I say it now, you won't believe me. However, since you insist on practicing martial arts, then you must do it step by step. Slowly move your right hand. When the time is right, then you can start practicing boxing." As the two talked, they returned to the small room. At this time, there was someone waiting in front of Zhang Xiaohu's room. When he saw Zhang Xiaohu return, he hurriedly said, "Zhang Xiaohu, where did you run off to? Sixth Master Li is anxiously looking for you." It seemed that the person was in a hurry. Zhang Xiaohu didn't have time to say anything to Zhang Xiaohua. He only told him not to go back to the villa and to wait for him to come back. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to leave by himself, but when he saw his second brother's glare, he obediently waited in the room. Just as he was bored waiting, he heard someone shout from outside, Zhang Xiaohua, where are you?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this familiar voice, he happily jumped down from the Kong bed. Before he left the room, he loudly replied, "I'm here, brother Ma, I'm here." It turned out that the person outside was Zhang Xiaohua's roommate, Ma Jing. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua hadn't seen this roommate of his for several months. He even threw some of the resentment in his heart to the back of his mind and rushed out of the room. When he reached the door, Ma Jing also followed the sound and came over. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua come out of the room, he was very happy. He went forward to hold Zhang Xiaohua's right hand. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua was already used to using his left hand, so naturally, he reached out his left hand. Ma Jing was stunned and quickly changed his hand. When Zhang Xiaohua understood, the scene of him scratching his feet immediately appeared in his mind. However, it was too late. His left hand had already been enthusiastically grabbed by Ma Jing's hand. His right hand also very naturally patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to withdraw his hand or his shoulder. He only heard Ma Jing enthusiastically say, "Brother, long time no see. I missed you a lot. How did your voice become so nice? You actually chased after me. You have a bit of my style in the past." Zhang Xiaohua withdrew his hand and wanted to let Ma Jing into the room, but Ma Jing held his hand tightly. Without waiting for him to speak, he continued, "Brother, did you know that day? I was thinking about going back to the manor to lead the way for you, so I went back before it was midnight. When I didn't see you at the entrance of the manor, I thought you went back to your room. However, I didn't see you at the entrance of the manor either, so I felt strange. You said that if you didn't go back, I wouldn't have to go back so early. Xiao Tao. Oh, I'll wait for you at the entrance of the manor for a while. Otherwise, you won't be able to find a place to stay when you come back at night. Moreover, you still didn't come back the next day, so I missed you even more. Brother Shi is also right. Although we're roommates, you can't let me do all your work alone. In any case, you should let others share some of your work, right? Without you, I'm so tired. I've been waiting for you like the stars and the moon. However, I heard from Brother Shi that your hand was injured. I'm going to faint. You can't let me do all your work, right? Fortunately, Brother Shi still has some humanity and didn't let me do all of it. However, compared to before, it's also more tiring. Look at how thin I've become. This is the after effect of that time." Zhang Xiaohua smiled apologetically and said, "Brother Ma, it's really been hard on you. Little brother apologizes. In the future, little brother will admire Brother Ma more." After saying this, he took the opportunity to pull out his left hand. However, as soon as he pulled it out, Ma Jing held it even more passionately. Ma Jing said with tears in his eyes, "Brother, you can see it too. However, don't admire Brother Shi. Brother Shi only has this shortcoming of taking pleasure in helping others." Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He could only stretch out his left hand and let Ma Jing hold it. However, he secretly swore in his heart, "In a while, I must wash my hands 8 to 10 times. Moreover, I must practice my body movements well. Next time, I definitely won't let Ma Jing get close to me." Then, Ma Jing talked about the trivial matters of the life of the people in the villa, as well as the trivial quarrels. It was a pity that Zhang Xiaohua only wanted to wash her hands. He was just playing the lute to a cow and casting pearls before swine. Finally, Ma Jing made a concluding statement, "Fortunately, after you were injured for a month, my closest comrade and roommate, Lu Er, came back and saved me from the sea of labor." "Oh right, you haven't seen Lu Er yet, right? Come here, let me introduce you." After saying this, he pulled Zhang Xiaohua's hand and stepped aside, revealing a short and honest figure behind him. Ma Jing's figure was not tall, but this fat man was actually shorter than Ma Jing. It was no wonder that Ma Jing blocked him and Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see him. However, this person's height was not as tall as Ma Jing, but his body was almost twice as fat as Ma Jing. Thinking about the food in Huanxi Villa, Zhang Xiaohua somewhat understood. Zhang Xiaohua quickly took the opportunity to pull her hand out and saluted the short and fat Lu Er, saying, "Lu Er Go, I've heard of your name for a long time, but I didn't meet you until today." That Lu Er also returned the salute and said in a very low voice, "Zhang Xiaohua, how are you? Have you recovered from your injury?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Thank you for your concern, Lu Er Go. I'm much better now." Then, Zhang Xiaohua said to the two of them, "Two big brothers, please come in and sit." Ma Jing stopped walking and looked at the sky, saying, "Xiaohua, it's already late. We didn't come here to see you." Zhang Xiaohua was disappointed and said, "Why are you leaving so soon? Why don't you sit and chat for a while? When my second brother comes back, I'll go with you. Anyway, my injury has recovered and I'm discussing with my second brother about going back to the villa." Ma Jing continued, "Yes, I didn't come here to see you. I came out to do some business and bring you back to the villa while I'm at it." Ma Jing emphasized the word see. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she suddenly understood. This Ma Jing's habits never changed. Zhang Xiaohua said, "How about this, Ma Gu, Luer Gu, you two go into the house first. I'll go find my second brother and let him know. I'll go with you two immediately." When the two heard this, they entered the house. However, when the two of them entered the house and Zhang Xiaohua walked out of the small courtyard, she realized that she didn't know where to look for Zhang Xiaohu. There were many people in the escort agency and the place was big. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't so stupid as to think that everyone in the agency would know Zhang Xiaohu. She had a vague impression of the martial arts center, but today, Zhang Xiaohu had been called away by 6th Master Li. She didn't know where the guards were, so she could only return to the house for the time being. When she returned to the house, Ma Jing asked, "How come you're done talking to your second brother so quickly?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "Not yet. I don't know where my second brother went either. I'd better pack up first or write him a note later." Ma Jing was stunned and said, "You know how to write? I remember that you don't know how to read." Zhang Xiaohua said proudly, "Ma Gu, a scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes. Moreover, we haven't seen each other for more than 3 months. Don't tell me I can't write." Ma Jing said enviously, "Xiaohua, you're not lying to your brother, right? No matter how I look at you, you don't look like someone who can write in 3 months." Zhang Xiaohua said as she packed up, "All right then. After I pack up, I'll perform for you. Let's see if I can write or not. Please bookmark it, thank you." Chapter 105. At this moment, Luer, who had been silent for a long time, spoke up, "We're not literate either. Who knows what you're writing?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and thought, "Yeah, second brother isn't literate either. He won't understand what I'm writing." However, she immediately changed her mind. If she didn't know, she could ask someone else. This wasn't a difficult thing to do, so she didn't stop. Zhang Xiaohua didn't have many things. When she came a few months ago, she wanted to stay at the escort agency for a while before returning to the villa. She didn't bring anything at all. Now, she only packed some books and miscellaneous items. She finished packing in no time. Thus, under the watchful eyes of Ma Jing and Luer, she skillfully spread out the paper and was about to look for a pen when she felt someone walk out of the house. She looked up and saw Zhang Xiaohu push the door open and enter. Zhang Xiaohua's senses were very sensitive now. Zhang Xiaohu walked out of the house with extremely light footsteps. Ma Jing and Luer didn't hear it, but Zhang Xiaohua could clearly feel it. Zhang Xiaohu pushed the door open and entered. Seeing a stranger in the house, he couldn't help but be startled. Zhang Xiaohua quickly introduced them to each other. Zhang Xiaohu quickly bowed and said, "Brother Ma, thank you for taking care of Xiaohua in the villa." Ma Jing also returned the greeting and said, "Brother Zhang, you're welcome. Xiaohua is young and can be considered our little brother. It's only right to take care of him." Zhang Xiaohua was the only one who cursed in her heart. Taking care of her was rare, but little shoes were endless. After Zhang Xiaohua explained the purpose of their visit, Zhang Xiaohu's face lit up and said, "You two came at the right time. I originally wanted to send Xiaohua to the villa, but I was called over by 6th Master Li early in the morning. It turns out that there is an escort mission that requires us to go out today and we don't have time. You two coming has fulfilled my wish." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she asked anxiously, "Second brother, where are these darts going?" Is there any danger? This is your first trip out, so you must be very careful. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, I can't tell you the exact location. This is the rules of the escort agency. However, it shouldn't be a problem. The place we're heading to is very close. Not only is it my first time going there, but the agency has also sent out most of the newbies who haven't been out before for the sake of training. They even made me the vice captain, so it shouldn't be too dangerous. Moreover, there's also a highly skilled and experienced bodyguard, Captain Ren, who will guide us. You can rest assured. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua was slightly relieved. When Ma Jing saw that Zhang Xiaohua's small bundle had been packed and the two brothers were still reluctant to part, he said to Zhang Xiaohu, It's getting late. Brother Zhang, we still have to rush back to the villa before noon. We can't stay here any longer. We'll take Zhang Xiaohua back now. If you have time, you can come to our villa to play. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he agreed and said, Brother Ma is right. It's right to hurry back to the villa and complete the mission. Let's go, I'll send you out. After saying this, he picked up the small bundle on the Kong bed and invited Ma Jing and Lu Ertu to go first. The carriage of Huanqi Villa was parked at the entrance of the escort agency. It was the same carriage that Qiu Tong used to take Zhang Xiaohua to the villa. Zhang Xiaohu stood in front of the carriage and looked at his younger brother. During this period of rest, Zhang Xiaohua had put on a lot of weight. His face was a little puffy and he didn't grow any taller. However, when he saw that his hands were still wrapped, he still felt a burst of bitterness. Zhang Xiaohu put the small bundle on the carriage and reminded him, remember what the doctor said just now. Do some restorative activities first. Don't do any heavy work. If you're not careful and your bones crack again, it'll be big trouble. Zhang Xiaohua was a little impatient when he heard this and said, I know, second brother. You've said it many times. Didn't I also tell you about the work in the villa? It's not tiring. Anyway, I can use my left hand very well. If I can't do it, I'll use my left hand. Actually, I just want to practice my fist techniques earlier. Since the doctor won't let me do it now, I'll wait a few days. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to listen anymore, and that he had said enough today. Perhaps saying more would make him suspicious, Zhang Xiaohu smiled and nodded. He then said to Ma Jing and Lu Er, Xiaohua's injuries have healed. However, the doctor said that he can't fully use his right hand for the time being. Please take care of the villa. This one thanks you in advance. After saying this, he bowed deeply. Ma Jing and Lu Ertu hurriedly returned the bow and agreed. Then, the three of them got into the carriage. The carriage slowly started and sped away. Zhang Xiaohu stood in front of the escort agency and waved his hand continuously. It wasn't until the carriage disappeared from sight and Zhang Xiaohua's small waving hand could no longer be seen that he turned around and entered the agency. On the way, Ma Jing pulled Zhang Xiaohua aside and asked him all sorts of questions. When he heard Zhang Xiaohu repeatedly tell Zhang Xiaohua not to practice his fist techniques, he was very puzzled. He remembered that when Zhang Xiaohua first arrived, didn't he say that he didn't know martial arts? How did he know how to practice his fist techniques? When Zhang Xiaohua was practicing his fist techniques with He Tianshu at the villa, he didn't intend to avoid Ma Jing and the others. Unfortunately, the green-clothed and hat-wearing people were from two different worlds from the Misty School's disciples. Usually, they only interacted with each other during meals and rest. Other than that, they didn't interfere with each other. In fact, the green-clothed and hat-wearing people had a faint sense of inferiority and didn't set foot in the Misty School's disciples' area of activity. Zhang Xiaohua naturally didn't know about this. After he entered the villa, he ate and worked with Ma Jing and the others. Other than that, he spent his free time with He Tianshu and the others. Therefore, Ma Jing didn't know anything about Zhang Xiaohua learning fist techniques. Now that Ma Jing asked, Zhang Xiaohua told him everything in detail. Ma Jing was very puzzled, but more than that, he felt admiration. Although he didn't say it out loud, he was muttering in his heart. With his aptitude and handsome appearance, why didn't He Tianshu take a fancy to him? Could it be that the heavens were jealous of his handsome appearance? Perhaps he should still sigh at his luck. He even thought about whether he should express his goodwill to the Misty School's disciples at breakfast tomorrow. After knowing that Zhang Xiaohua could perform a few fist techniques, Ma Jing was even more curious about how he was injured at the escort agency. After Zhang Xiaohua finished explaining the situation, Ma Jing immediately dismissed the idea of practicing martial arts and put away his goodwill. Tomorrow, he would still be hostile. What a joke! Why would he practice fist techniques? He had only been practicing for a month and had only learned a few moves before he was beaten to death. If he were to practice martial arts, he would definitely be better than Zhang Xiaohua. Then, wouldn't he be beaten to death with a single palm strike? He thought about what Zhang Xiaohua said. His second brother, Zhang Xiaohu, was 10 times stronger than him. Wasn't he also beaten to a pulp by Yu Dai and almost lost his life? He was still wise to not walk the path of martial arts. He patted his chest and was secretly happy that he had embarked on a career with a bright future. The honest Lu Er beside him only listened and occasionally smiled to express his agreement. He faithfully performed all the actions that a minor character should do. The carriage arrived at Huanxi Manor in a short while. They entered through the side door as usual. The carriage stopped at the side door and waited for the guard to inspect it. Ma Jing and Lu Er were not like Qiu Tong. They didn't need any waste tokens and could even bring strangers into the manor. They obediently took out their waste tokens and handed them over. Then, the guard looked at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and then patted her forehead. Yes, she had received a waste token when she left the manor a few months ago. Naturally, she had to return that waste token now. However, where did she put that waste token? She hadn't used it for a long time and seemed to have forgotten about it. She seemed to have used it as a paperweight when she was learning to read and write from Li Jinfeng. She didn't pay attention to whether she had put it in when she was packing her bag. The small bag had to be knotted. Knots were easy to tie, but difficult to untie. Zhang Xiaohua's left hand and injured right hand were very difficult to untie. Ma Jing was at the side and naturally took over the bag and helped untie it. Zhang Xiaohua flipped through the things inside. Sure enough, she found the missing waste token among a few books. She picked it up and casually handed it to Ma Jing. Ma Jing didn't care and casually glanced at it. He turned around and was about to hand it to the guard. Just as he was about to reach out, he suddenly thought of something and said, "Eh." He retracted his hand and carefully looked at the waste token. He looked at it up and down, left and right. Then, he frowned and asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, why is your waste token different from ours?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She took the waste token and looked at it carefully. She said, "This is it. I don't have any other waste tokens, only this one. It should have been given when I left the manor last time. Could it be that this waste token doesn't belong to our manor? It's broken. Did I lose it?" Ma Jing was also stunned. He said, "This waste token should belong to our manor. It's similar to ours. Also, it looks familiar to me. I think I've seen it somewhere before." Zhang Xiaohua asked, "Why? There are many types of waste tokens in the manor." Ma Jing said, "Yes, according to the work they do, everyone's waste tag is different. Just like Nye Er and the others who are next to us. I remember now. When Nye Er first came here, he went to Pingyang City with me. His waste tag was like this. At that time, I even held 2 waste tokens and compared them. That's why yours looks more familiar. How can you hold this kind of waste token?" Zhang Xiaohua said with a bitter smile, "Brother Ma, this is also my first time holding a waste token. How would I know the reason? You might as well ask the guard." Ma Jing heard and felt that it made sense. He handed the waste token to the guard. The guard took it and carefully checked it. After registering it, he kept it. At this moment, Ma Jing went up to him and asked, "Brother guard, can I ask you a question?" That guard nodded. Ma Jing asked, "Brother guard, can you tell me why this little brother of mine can receive this kind of waste token? When the guard heard this, he laughed as if he was looking at an idiot. He replied, I don't know either. I'm only in charge of verifying if it's a real waste token and letting people enter the manor. As for who uses what waste token, I don't care. You have to go to the front and ask the person who gives out the waste tokens. Ma Jing was unhappy when he heard this. What was the difference between this and not saying anything? However, he didn't dare to show his dissatisfaction. He put on a fake smile and thanked the guard. That guard didn't say anything. He waved his hand and let the horse carriage enter the manor. He slandered in his heart, I know you're unhappy. You say thank you, but who knows what you're saying about me in your heart. The horse carriage dropped the 3 people at the entrance of the small courtyard and went elsewhere. Zhang Xiaohua got off the car and looked at the familiar outer sect. He sighed with emotion. Time flew by and people changed. He hadn't seen them for a few months, but he had many feelings. When he first arrived, he was like a child, unfamiliar with this place. In a month, he had entered and exited the outer sect countless times, as well as the empty space beside the outer sect. He was covered in sweat and had dozens of incomplete moves. Then, he went out alone, and in the blink of an eye, several months had passed. When he looked back, he was already injured. Fate made fools of people. Fate was cruel. Carrying his small bag, Zhang Xiaohua followed Ma Jing and Lu Er into the courtyard. It was already noon, but the others hadn't come back yet. The courtyard was quiet. Zhang Xiaohua was a little absent-minded. He followed the 2 into the small house. Then, he threw the bag on the Kong bed that he used to live in and sat down casually. However, he soon found that Ma Jing was looking at him strangely. Lu Er was also looking at him uncharacteristically and laughing foolishly. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be stunned. He looked down at his body and then at his feet. He didn't step on dog shit. What was there to see? But when he raised his head and looked around, he couldn't help but jump down from the Kong bed. It turned out that the Kong bed had been replaced with a different bedding. The things on the small table on the Kong bed were also different. Zhang Xiaohua then remembered that before he came to the mountain villa, Lu Er was in the same room as Ma Jing. Since he came back and he wasn't in the mountain villa, Lu Er naturally continued to live in the original room and Kong bed. He didn't care and made others laugh. Zhang Xiaohua blushed and was about to say something when Lu Er quickly said, "It's okay. Zhang Xiaohua, if you're tired, sit on the Kong bed for a while. You just recovered from your injury, so you should pay more attention." Zhang Xiaohua was touched. What a good person. It was rare to see someone like him in green. Lu Er continued to say, "If you're used to sleeping on this Kong bed, I'll go find Brother Shi and have him arrange a room for me. You can stay with Brother Ma." Zhang Xiaohua woke up as if struck by lightning. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Don't. A gentleman doesn't take what others love. Since it's Brother Lu Er's original Kong bed, I naturally have to give it up. There's no way for me to continue sleeping there. It's better for me to go out and find another place." Lu Er said, "I'm used to sleeping anywhere. You're an injured patient. It's better for you to stay in the original place. The power of habit is endless. It's also beneficial for your recovery." Thus, the 2 of them fought over the Kong bed. They both wanted to give the best Kong bed to each other. Ma Jing, who was watching from the side, sighed with emotion. They were both good people. It's also because of my good character that the people who live with me can be influenced to become gentlemen. Just as the 2 of them were arguing, a burst of noise came from the courtyard. Presumably, Tian Zhongxi and the others had returned. Zhang Xiaohua happily ran out of the small house. It wasn't only to escape Lu Er's enthusiasm, but also to see these Tian friends that she had struggled with for a month. When Zhang Xiaohua appeared in the courtyard, the green-clothed people were very surprised. They all surrounded her and asked her all sorts of questions. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't that familiar with them. Moreover, in this short month, she hadn't really integrated into their circle. It was only a few months that they hadn't seen each other, so everyone felt a sense of novelty. Moreover, they had heard that this Zhang Xiaohua had actually been injured in a martial arts competition and had almost lost her life. Naturally, they were very curious. One of them said, "Zhang Xiaohua, I heard that you challenged that strongman of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. He flew into a rage out of humiliation and heavily injured you with one slap. Is that true?" Another one asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, I heard that you fought with 12 experts of the escort agency in a row and finally died of exhaustion. Is that true?" Another one said, "Zhang Xiaohua, I heard that you were bewitched by the female escort of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. She even used the yin-yang harmony powder to knock you down. You are our idol." "That's right, how was that female escort's figure?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she felt a burst of dizziness. What was going on? She originally wanted to tell them in detail, but she suddenly didn't have the strength to say a single word. She could only smile and respond with a and ah. Tian Zhongxi, on the other hand, stood outside the circle with a calm expression. No one knew what he was thinking about. When everyone had made enough noise, he put on a stern face and scolded, "Everyone, disperse. Zhang Xiaohua is back. If you want to know anything, there will be plenty of opportunities and time to ask in the future. She hasn't fully recovered yet. If you guys bump into her, be careful that you guys have to pay Zhang Xiaohua's medical fees." These words were really effective. The group of people in green immediately distanced themselves from Zhang Xiaohua. Even if Zhang Xiaohua were to fall down now, they definitely wouldn't have to bear any responsibility. Tian Zhongxi continued, "Hurry up and tidy up to eat. After that, there's still a lot of work to do in the afternoon. If you delay, don't blame me for docking your wages." These words were even more effective. Who would want to refuse their own wages? They immediately dispersed and returned to their own rooms. Their warm feelings of concern immediately vanished like smoke in thin air. Tian Zhongxi looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who was surprised by everyone's quick actions, and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, come with me." After that, he didn't wait for him and walked back to his own room. Zhang Xiaohua felt strange when she saw Tian Zhongxi's indifferent attitude towards her. However, now was not the time to think about it. Seeing that Tian Zhongxi was about to enter the room, she quickly followed him. Tian Zhongxi walked into the room and turned to look at Zhang Xiaohua, who ran into the room. He said in a flat tone, "Zhang Xiaohua, how's your injury?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at Tian Zhongxi carefully and said, "It's okay, brother Shi. Although I haven't fully recovered, I can work with my left hand. It won't affect the work assigned to us by the villa." Tian Zhongxi said, "Hehe, this is not under my control. I'm relieved that your injury has recovered. After all, you used to be my little brother. If anything happened to you, I wouldn't feel good." These words were strange. Zhang Xiaohua still didn't understand. However, Tian Zhongxi pointed to a pile of bedding on the idol Kong and said, "That's your bedding. See if there's anything missing. Then follow me. I'll arrange a place for you to live in the future." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was like a monkey whose tail was burned. She immediately jumped up and said, "Brother Shi, please, don't arrange for me to live in Brother Ma's room again. Please, please." Chapter 106. Tian Zhongxi looked at Zhang Xiaohua's fawning face and couldn't help but smile. He said, "Bring me the bedding first. It's not up to me to decide where you live." Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled again and asked, "Brother Shi, then, who has the final say?" Tian Zhongxi ignored her and waved his hand. "Come, follow me. You'll know when you get there." After he finished speaking, he pushed the door open and walked out with a deep look on his face. Zhang Xiaohua was confused. She had to take the bedding and follow Tian Zhongxi out. Tian Zhongxi went out and turned left. It was in the direction of Ma Jing's house. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Moreover, Tian Zhongshi's footsteps stopped in front of Ma Jing's house. Zhang Xiaohua's heartbeat suddenly accelerated. She complained in her heart, he said he wouldn't let me live in this house. It turned out that he was tricking me. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see Tian Zhongshi's face, but there was a smile on his face. The corners of his mouth were also upturned. It seemed that he was playing. When Zhang Xiaohua's heart jumped to her throat, he moved forward again. The pitiful Zhang Xiaohua didn't realize that he was being toyed with at all. He let out a long sigh and thanked the gods in his heart. Only then did he cheerfully follow. Tian Zhongxi didn't stop until he reached the end of the row of houses. He knocked on the door. Another voice that Zhang Xiaohua was very familiar with came from the house. "Who is it? Come in." This was actually He Tianxu's room. Speaking of the people Zhang Xiaohua wanted to see most in Huanqi Mountain Villa, He Tianxu was definitely one of the candidates. She thought that she could see him after dinner. Who knew that she would meet him in such a situation as soon as she returned to the villa? Zhang Xiaohua followed Tian Zhongxi into the house with the bedding. Seeing the face that she hadn't seen for months, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to cry. This kind of thought didn't arise when he woke up after being injured and saw Zhang Xiaohu. Tian Zhongxi looked at He Tianxu and said, "Captain He, I've brought Zhang Xiaohua." Zhang Xiaohua stood alone at the door of the room. She hugged the blanket with her left hand and called out timidly, "Captain He." He was like a child who had been bullied. He felt wronged but did not dare to tell his family. He could only swallow his teeth. His eyes were pleading for help, hoping that his family would stand up for him. He Tianxu looked at his stupid disciple and thought about his half-baked and incomplete fist technique. He thought about how he persistently practiced his fist technique in the middle of the night under the moonlight. He thought about how he actually dared to face a powerful opponent and bravely extended his little fist in order to save his brother's life with his right hand. Although He Tianxu did not see it with his own eyes, he could imagine Zhang Xiaohua's stubborn gaze and his determined footsteps even with his eyes closed. He even remembered the horse stance that he had personally taught him. However, He Tianxu didn't take another look at Zhang Xiaohua. He retracted his gaze and smiled at Tian Zhongxi. "Okay, sorry to trouble you. Leave it to me." Tian Zhongxi nodded and didn't say anything else. He turned around and walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua. He patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, from now on, Captain He will be in charge of you. Take care of your body." After he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Zhang Xiaohua to say anything and walked away. Zhang Xiaohua didn't seem to understand what had happened. She just stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do next. Fortunately, at this moment, He Tianxu walked up and asked gently, "Zhang Xiaohua, how are your injuries?" Zhang Xiaohua came back to her senses. She smiled and said, "Captain He, it's nothing serious. I can move around a little." Then, Zhang Xiaohua said apologetically, "Captain He, I'm sorry." He Tianxu was stunned and asked, "Sorry? Why?" Zhang Xiaohua said strangely, "I was injured during the competition. Naturally, I lost face for you. However, you can punish me however you want. Just don't expel me from the sect." He Tianxu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He asked, "Who told you this?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Isn't it written in the books? Isn't it true?" He Tianxu was stunned and asked, "Aren't you illiterate? You heard it from someone." Zhang Xiaohua looked up and said proudly, "Captain He, I can read now. I can even write. I read all these in books." He Tianxu was even more stunned. He said, "In just a few months, you can read and read? Not bad, you're really a good child." Zhang Xiaohua heard He Tianxu's praise and blushed. She said modestly, "I didn't learn much. I just learned the Shua Wen Jie Zi that children used to learn. I also read a few books that they must learn." "What?" "The Shua Wen Jie Zi that is used to teach children." This time, it was He Tianxu's turn to be confused. "You said that you finished learning the Shua Wen Jie Zi?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she felt embarrassed and said, Captain He, I was wrong again. I shouldn't have boasted. I know that this is something that children in Pingyang City learn. I won't say it again. He Tianshu fell to the ground with a thud. Then, he flipped himself up and stood steadily in front of Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua looked at him with stars in her eyes. She thought to herself, idle, idle. What a graceful posture. I don't know when I can learn it. Poor He Tianshu patted his forehead and thought, Shuawen Jiezi, a children's first lesson? Am I having a fever? Then, He Tianshu asked, where's your first lesson book? Let me see. Zhang Xiaohua then remembered and said hurriedly, oh, I forgot it in Ma Jing's room. I'll go get it now. With that, she turned and ran out. He Tianshu immediately stopped her and said, there's no need, Zhang Xiaohua. Let's talk about it in the future. Zhang Xiaohua obediently stopped in her tracks. He Tianshu said, whether you heard it or saw it yourself, you can't take it seriously. First of all, you're not my disciple. I'm only teaching you fist techniques. This is something that's widely spread in the martial arts world. It's not my unique technique. You're not my disciple, so I can't chase you out. Secondly, you did very well this time. Even if I'm your master, I won't blame you. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, really? Captain He, you also think that I did very well. But I was defeated. I couldn't even take a slap from him. He Tianshu patted her shoulder and said, silly Hua, you've only learned fist techniques for a few days. How many years did he learn? What kind of fist techniques did you learn? What kind of inner strength mantra did he learn? Although the purple sand palm isn't some profound inner strength mantra, against someone like you who hasn't even seen the shadow of martial arts, it's like an adult against a newborn child. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Oh right, let me take a look at your injuries. He Tianshu held up Zhang Xiaohua's right hand and said, put the blanket on the chair first. Zhang Xiaohua placed her blanket on the chair next to her and obediently allowed He Tianshu to carefully pinch her fingers. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's right hand was still wrapped in bandages. He Tianshu didn't unwrap the bandages and only felt them carefully through the bandages. When He Tianshu felt the bones of her right hand's fingers and wrist, he looked at He Tianshu's fluctuating expression and said cheerfully, Captain He, you're recovering well, right? The doctor at the escort agency said that I can't practice fist techniques for the time being and can only do so in a few days. Sigh, I really can't wait. I want to be able to practice the horse stance right now. He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's excited expression and wanted to say something but stopped himself. He smiled and said, all right, I'll take a look at your injuries in a few days and we can practice fist techniques together. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, really, Captain He, you can teach me fist techniques again? Aren't you afraid that I'll forget again? Hearing this, He Tianshu immediately came to his senses and said regretfully, this? Well, I'll let second brother Nya teach you. When you're almost done learning, I'll teach you then. Zhang Xiaohua said cheerfully, then I'll definitely learn from second brother Nya so that I won't embarrass Captain He in the next fist technique competition. He Tianshu smiled a little reluctantly and said, all right, I believe you can do it. Then, He Tianshu said, but before you start practicing, I have to arrange a place for you to stay. Oh, didn't brother Shi say? Zhang Xiaohua paused and said incredulously, Captain He, could it be that the person brother Shi was talking about is you? He Tianshu smiled and said, didn't Tian Zhongxi say just now that he's leaving you to me? Didn't you hear him clearly? Or are you so stupid that you can't even understand this? Zhang Xiaohua grinned and said, these things, I'm sometimes confused and sometimes I understand. Of course I know that you're arranging for me, but I can't believe it. I'm just a manservant in the villa. You're a Misty School student who came to the villa to plant herbs. We're not related at all, so how can I be managed by you? This is what I'm puzzled about. He Tianshu scolded with a smile, how do you know that you're a manservant in the Huanxi villa? You didn't come to the Huanxi villa as a manservant, but as a member of the Lotus Escort Agency. You're different from those people who wear green clothes and hats. You hang out with them every day and don't have any awareness of being an escort agency. Think about it, if you were just a manservant, the villa lord might not have let me teach you fist techniques. Zhang Xiaohua finally understood and said, "Oh, I know. No wonder the waist tag that was given to me when I went out was different from that of Brother Ma and the others. So it was like this." "Yes, it's like this." He Tianshu nodded and said, "When you first came, you were indeed replacing Lu Er's work. However, if that's the case, wouldn't it be a waste of the strength of your arms? The villa lord would never let you do ordinary work. You were just there to adapt to the environment. However, plans can't keep up with changes. Before I could adjust for you, you had an accident. I thought that I wouldn't be able to see you again, but it just so happened that the third Master Chu of the escort agency came to the villa lord to plead for you. The villa lord also took pity on you and put you back into my team. Do you understand?" Zhang Xiaohua beamed with joy and said, "I understand, Captain He. I'll be in your care in the future." "Oh right, I haven't met Sister Villa Lord yet. She's really a good person. I'll have to thank her properly in the future." He Tianshu smiled and rubbed his head, saying, "Yes, you should really thank the Villa Lord. She's really good to you. Alright, come with me. I'll arrange a room for you first. I still have to go eat." After he finished speaking, He Tianshu picked up the bedding on the chair and was about to leave. Zhang Xiaohua wouldn't let him take it. He quickly used his left hand to snatch the bedding and said, "Captain He, I'll take it myself." He Tianshu didn't return it to him and said with a smile, "Your hand isn't convenient. I'll take it for you. It's only a matter of 2 steps." When Zhang Xiaohua heard He Tianshu's words, he thought that it made sense and didn't insist. He Tianshu took the bedding and led Zhang Xiaohua out the door. He turned right and walked to the front of the 5th room. He pushed the door open and went in. No one lived in the room, but it was very clean. The layout of the room was the same as the room Zhang Xiaohua used to live in. He Tianshu threw the bedding onto a kong and said to Zhang Xiaohua, "From today onwards, this room is yours. You don't have to work for the time being. Take care of your injuries. If you can't stay idle, you can go with Nye Xiao, to the medicine field to take a look." Zhang Xiaohua looked at the empty room and said in confusion, "Captain He, there's no one else in this room. I'm the only one living here." He Tianshu smiled and said, "Yes, our treatment is different from Tianzhong Shi and the others. We all live in a room alone. Nye Xiao, and the others are the same. Don't tell me you want to live with them. But even if you want to, they won't be willing. You should be at ease and live alone." Zhang Xiaohua rubbed her head and said, "It's nothing. I'll live alone then. But I haven't lived in a room alone since I was young. I'm not used to it." He Tianshu said, "Yes, slowly get used to it. If there's anything you need, you can tell me. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me, or ask Nye Xiao, and the others. You're familiar with them, so you'll probably be bullied by them." Then, he patted his belly and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, it's already past noon. Are you hungry? I'm so hungry that my front is sticking to my back. Do you want to eat with me?" Zhang Xiaohua cheered and said, "Okay, I haven't eaten the food from the mountain villa. I miss it very much. Captain He, let's go together." After saying that, the 2 of them walked to the dining room one after the other. When they walked into the dining room, everyone's lunch was coming to an end. He Tianshu's entrance didn't attract anyone's attention, but Zhang Xiaohua behind him attracted everyone's attention. Some of the people in green who had finished eating and were preparing to leave also sat down, as if waiting for something. Zhang Xiaohua walked into the hall and naturally walked to the 2 tables of the people in green. However, she noticed that the 2 tables were full of people. There wasn't a single empty seat. It seemed that she had encountered the awkwardness of the first meal. Could it be another small trap by the people in green? Zhang Xiaohua's seat used to be Lu Er's, but now that Lu Er was back, that seat was naturally taken by Lu Er. Of course, there was no empty seat for Zhang Xiaohua to sit. And those people in green who had finished eating didn't leave their seats. Then, where could Zhang Xiaohua sit? It seemed that this was the reason why the people in green sat down again. Unfortunately, the joke in their eyes was that Zhang Xiaohua wasn't at a loss like before. They saw Zhang Xiaohua take a few steps forward and suddenly patted her forehead. She changed direction and went in another direction. The people in green thought that maybe Zhang Xiaohua was going to get a chair. However, they still sat firmly in front of the dining table and didn't move at all. It seemed that they were clinging to the dining table and didn't relax. If there wasn't any free space, what was the use of taking a chair? However, when Zhang Xiaohua walked to He Tianchu's table, she didn't continue to look for a chair as everyone thought. Instead, she sat down unceremoniously. Everyone was stunned for a moment before snickering. Who didn't know that the bunch of people from Ethereal's sect had always looked down on people in green robes and hats? Now that a new manservant was sitting among them, wouldn't he be kicked back by them? The people who were expecting to see Zhang Xiaohua embarrassed didn't expect to see someone being flattened. Their hearts were filled with anticipation. They waited for the wonderful moment when Zhang Xiaohua was kicked away. Just as dozens of pairs of eyes were watching, Niaer from the Misty School raised his hand. The people in green shouted in their hearts, 1, 2, 3, clap. When they shouted clap in their hearts, Niaer didn't send Zhang Xiaohua flying with one slap as they expected. Instead, he gently landed on Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. His face was smiling like a flower as he said, "Brother, you're finally back. Are your injuries better? Hurry up and eat some drumsticks. I heard that eating something is good for nourishment." Ding dang, clang clang, plop. A series of chaotic noises were heard. The people in green clothes and small hats all had their glasses fall off. Some had their eyeballs fall off. Some had their eyeballs fall off. Some had their jaws drop. They were in a state of panic. Some even fell to the ground. After everyone sat down again and tidied up their faces, they stood up in exhaustion. They didn't see the excitement that they had hoped for and could only entertain themselves. They walked out of the dining room and collectively looked at the scorching sun in the sky. They shouted in unison, "How strange, the sun didn't rise from the west." Afterwards, the people in green all stared at Zhang Xiaohua, who was happily eating as if they were looking at a traitor whose life was about to come to an end. They fiercely stared at her for a few times before resentfully leaving. They almost spat a few mouthfuls of phlegm on the ground. It wasn't that they didn't want to vomit, but they were afraid that they would be fined by the middle-aged woman on duty in the villa. There was no invoice, so even if they were fined, they wouldn't be able to find anyone to reimburse them. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know about the petty thoughts of the people in green all the time. Perhaps she didn't want to know. She was doing her best to eat the delicacies in front of her. In the past, she already felt that the working meals of the people in green all the time were not bad. In the past few months, Yudei's meals had also raised Zhang Xiaohua's appetite. Her taste was also a bit tricky, and she was no longer as ignorant as she was when she first came here. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua realized how ignorant she was at that time. She actually thought that He Tianshu and the others ate too little and didn't have enough food. Alas, the ancients said that one could never get tired of eating good food. Oh, right, there was also a saying, "The ignorant are fearless." There is a survey for authors. Please select it. Please add it, thank you. Chapter 107. By the time Zhang Xiaohua slowly finished his first lunch after returning to the manor, the people around him had already left. Zhang Xiaohua and He Tianshu had arrived late. Seeing that He Tianshu had hurriedly finished his meal, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to stand up but was stopped by He Tianshu. He told her to eat slowly and not to rush. Anyway, he did not arrange any work for her in the afternoon. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua sat down obediently and ate this and that. She only left the dining hall when she felt full. The afternoon sun was very warm, especially when she was full. Zhang Xiaohua walked leisurely under the sun, her steps light. It was rare to have such a beautiful afternoon and she should enjoy it. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiaohua was squinting when a female voice called out to her, "Zhang Xiaohua? Did you just finish eating?" She turned around and saw that Qiu Tong had seen her from the small courtyard in the distance. Zhang Xiaohua ran over happily and called out, "Sister Qiu Tong, why are you here?" Qiu Tong smiled and said, "The manor lord is in a bad mood today, so I went to the dining hall to take a look. What delicious food do you have here? Can I bring some back for the manor lord?" Zhang Xiaohua asked with concern, "What happened to Sister Manor Lord?" Qiu Tong said with a bitter expression, "You don't know about the matters of the manor. Don't ask too much." Oh, Zhang Xiaohua changed the topic very honestly and said, "Sister Qiu Tong, I only returned to the manor this morning. Ma Jing and Lu Er went to the escort agency to fetch me." Qiu Tong smiled and said, "I know. I was the one who asked them to go. I was not free during this period. Today, Tian Zhongxi happened to say that someone was going to Pingyang City to purchase something, so I asked them to bring you back." Zhang Xiaohua looked at Qiu Tong gratefully and said, "Sister Qiu Tong, thank you. You are so good to me, just like my sister Lu Qian." Lu Qian? Qiu Tong was stunned and said, "Who is that?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Sister Lu Qian is my sister-in-law now. Before marrying my big brother, I called her big sister." Qiu Tong smiled and said, "Xiaohua, everyone likes you because you're a good child who knows how to endure hardships. It's not just me." Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, "That's right. There's also Sister Manor Lord. When will I have to properly thank her?" Qiu Tong said, "Yes, there will be a chance. Just keep it in mind for now." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "I know, Sister Qiu Tong." Qiu Tong asked again, "How are your injuries now?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Okay, the doctor said that other than not being able to carry heavy things, everything else is fine." Qiu Tong nodded and said, "I'm sure you already know that I've assigned you to Captain He's place this time. He's already arranged a place for you to stay." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "Yes, when I came back, Brother Shi brought me to Captain He's place and then arranged a room for me. See, I just had a meal with them and was about to go back." Qiu Tong said, "That's good. You haven't fully recovered yet, so don't do anything too heavy. First, you can learn from Captain He. He has some problems that are difficult to solve, so you probably won't need to do anything." Zhang Xiaohua asked, "What problems? Is it serious?" Qiu Tong said, "You'll know when you go and take a look. Sigh, this is also the Manor Lord's sore point. If you can solve it, you'll be doing the Manor Lord a great favor. It's much better than thanking her." "Pfft, look at what I'm thinking. Xiaohua, you don't have to take it to heart. I'm just saying. Even they can't do anything about it. What can a child like you do? Alright, I won't talk to you anymore. I'm in a hurry to go back. You should take care of yourself too. You've just recovered and your body is still weak. Don't get sick again. That'll only make things worse." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Alright, Qiu Tong Jijia. I'll be careful. I'm leaving." With that said, the two waved goodbye and went their separate ways. Along the way, Zhang Xiaohua was still thinking, what kind of problem did Captain He and the Manor Lord encounter? Even the Manor Lord is so worried that he can't eat. But if they can't do anything, then I can't do anything either. I'll go take a look first. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua returned to his room. His bag was still in Ma Jing's room. They must have gone to work now. It wasn't appropriate for him to go get his things now. It was better to wait until they came back at night. Although Captain He had told him that he didn't have to work in the afternoon and that he could rest in his room, how could he calm down? He was a teenager and didn't have the patience to sit down. Moreover, he had spent the past few months on the Kong bed. He rarely went out of Zhang Xiaohu's room. Now that he had the opportunity, how could he stay at home alone? After closing the door, Zhang Xiaohua followed the path that he had walked before to find He Tianshu and the others. He didn't know exactly where He Tianshu worked. However, he used to listen to Ma Jing's nagging, so he knew the general location. It wasn't too far away from the green-clothed men. Along the way, he saw many green-clothed men busy watering and weeding. Many people also saw Zhang Xiaohua. Some were even whispering to each other and even pointing at him. Zhang Xiaohua thought of Ma Jing and naturally knew that they were jealous. He didn't care and just walked forward. He Tianshu's medicine field was separated from Tian Zhongshi's. There were some simple barriers in the middle to prevent the green-clothed men from going over. It was obvious from afar. In the past, Zhang Xiaohua only looked at it from afar and didn't have the intention to go closer. Now, as he walked over, he didn't feel nervous at all. After passing the barrier, he looked up. There wasn't much difference between this side and the other side. There were just a few medicine fields. However, the medicine fields here were not very neat. Some of the fields already had medicinal herbs growing, but some were bare, as if they had just been reclaimed. He Tianshu and the others were also busy. When Zhang Xiaohua came closer, they noticed. He Tianshu smiled and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, why didn't you rest in the house? Why did you come over?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Captain He, I can't stay idle. I'll follow you. If I understand it, it'll be easier for me to do it in the future." He Tianshu said, "The medicine fields here are not much different from the other side. It's just that the medicinal herbs are more important. Some medicinal herbs may need to be planted more carefully. I heard from Tian Zhongxi that you did a good job there. You grew up in the fields since you were young, so it shouldn't be a problem. Later, follow Nye Xiao'er and watch carefully. He'll tell you the special places to pay attention to." But Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, "But what?" He Tianshu said, "But, I hope your memory won't be as bad as when you practice boxing. Make Nye Xiao'er repeat it 180 times. Zhang Xiaohua blushed and said, "No, Captain He, my memory is quite good. Even young Master Li praised me before. But I'm just bad at boxing, hee." He Tianshu asked, "Which young Master Li?" Zhang Xiaohua explained, "It's Li Jinfeng, young Master Li. He's studying at the academy. He's the teacher who taught me how to read." He Tianshu's eyes lit up and said, "The teacher who taught you with Shuawen Jiezi? He's really interesting. If there's a chance, I'd like to meet him." Zhang Xiaohua said, "Captain He also knows that he's interesting. When I see him next time, I'll tell him to come and see you." He Tianshu waved his hand and said, "Don't say that he wants to see me. If there's a chance, let's all meet up together." Zhang Xiaohua said, "Okay, young Master Li is also a very easygoing person. He won't have any objections." After that, Nye Xiao'er brought Zhang Xiaohua to work while explaining to him. The medicine field here was indeed more complicated than the other side. Every medicine had to be watered at different times and amounts. There were also many things to take note of and the specific details of the operation that needed to be carefully memorized. Luckily, Zhang Xiaohua's brain was better than when he was practicing boxing. Otherwise, He Tianshu would really be worried. There weren't many medicine fields under the care of the medicine hall, only a few pieces. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be He Tianshu and the others who came. However, in these few fields, there was still a small portion of the land that wasn't planted with medicine. But just as Zhang Xiaohua was learning the details from Nye Xiao'er, Zhang Xiaohua actually saw He Tianshu bringing someone with him to water those empty fields. He even carefully squatted there and occasionally picked up the soil to look at it, frowning as he thought about something. Zhang Xiaohua was very curious and asked Nye Xiao'er, "Big brother Xiao'er, what do you think Captain He is doing? Why is he watering the empty fields and spacing out?" Nye Xiao'er glared at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, I'm warning you. Don't call me Big Brother Xiao'er in the future. Why does it feel like you're calling a waiter?" No matter what, your big brother Nya is still a disciple of the Misty School. He has some status in the pugilistic world. Why does it sound like this in your mouth? This is the last time. Call me Big Brother Xiao Nya in the future. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, I know. Hurry and tell me what's going on with Captain He, Big Brother Xiao'er. Nya Xiao'er's nose was crooked from anger. He gave a humph and ignored him. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly apologized and said, all right. Big Brother Xiao Nya, I was wrong, okay? Please be magnanimous and don't be angry, okay? Seeing that Nya Xiao'er still didn't speak, Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and said, if you continue to be angry, when my injuries heal, I'll find Captain He and have him assign you to teach me fist techniques. When Nya Xiao'er heard this, he immediately surrendered and said with a smile, Big Brother Xiaohua, you're going off topic. If you want to learn fist techniques, just tell your big brother Nya. We don't need to trouble Captain He. You see, isn't he worrying about something right now? Let him worry about the farm. Actually, speaking of this matter, we have to start from planting medicinal herbs. You might have heard from Ma Jing and the others about how we opened up this medicinal field. It's specifically for the medicine hall's use. The herbs planted here aren't normal herbs, but some of the herbs that our Misty School obtained from other places and have already been lost in the pugilistic world. Otherwise, why wouldn't they let Ma Jing and the others plant it and instead have us come here from Misty Mountain Villa? Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, this, I do know a little about it. But what does it have to do with this empty space? Nya Xiao'er smiled mysteriously and said, Big Brother Xiaohua, open your wise eyes and take a look. Or use your strict thinking to think about it. If it was an empty space, would Captain He have gone crazy and poured water there? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, could it be that it's not an empty space? Nya Xiao'er said matter-of-factly and said, of course it is. There are seeds planted there. Zhang Xiaohua was even more confused and said, then why haven't they sprouted? Haven't the other medicinal fields sprouted long ago? Some of them have already grown very tall. Nya Xiao'er spread out his hands and said, yes, why haven't they sprouted? This is the reason why Captain He is so worried. If I knew, I would become a captain. Or, I wouldn't be a burden to Captain He. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua understood and also understood what Qiu Tong meant when she saw her in the morning. The seeds of these herbs had been planted for more than half a year, but they still hadn't sprouted. Presumably, they didn't know the reason, so they couldn't cultivate more herbs. There was no way for a lost herb to reappear in the Misty School. No wonder He Tianshu was worried. Big Sister Village Head didn't eat. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiaohua was just a normal child. He only knew how to cultivate crops. Now, he even knew how to cultivate normal herbs. He didn't think that he would be able to solve these problems. Looking at the pitiful He Tianshu, Zhang Xiaohua still focused on her studies. She slowly familiarized herself with Nya Xiao'er and tried to get into the role as soon as possible. The afternoon passed as Zhang Xiaohua studied diligently. At night, Zhang Xiaohua took her little bag out of Ma Jing's room. Ignoring Ma Jing's persistent attempts to pull her hand and his resentful gaze, she ran back to her room like a wisp of smoke. She had finally escaped Ma Jing's demonic feet. How could she want to stay a moment longer? When she thought about how Lu Er didn't seem to feel any discomfort while staying there, Zhang Xiaohua's admiration for Lu Er immediately surged like a torrential river. Night time was still the time for He Tianshu and the others to practice. Zhang Xiaohua went to the training room as usual. Not long after, He Tianshu and the others arrived. He Tianshu said, Zhang Xiaohua, don't practice boxing yet. Try to get into the horse stance. See if your right arm can withstand it. Zhang Xiaohua tried and said, Captain He, my arm is fine. However, the bandage on my right hand is still there. I can't make a fist. He Tianshu said, then don't make a fist. Try the horse stance. You haven't done it for a few months, right? Zhang Xiaohua blushed and said, that's right. In the beginning, I stayed on the Kong bed all day long and didn't dare to move. Later on, when I got better and could move, I hurt my bones again. I just walked around the room. I've long forgotten about the horse stance. He Tianshu smiled and said, that's right. You didn't practice the horse stance at all. How could you care about it? It's not your fault that you don't know how to cherish things that you get easily. I'm guessing that you've already returned those moves to me. Zhang Xiaohua argued, no, Captain He. I still remember those moves. If you don't believe me, I'll show you. After saying that, she was about to get into the stance and start practicing. He Tianshu hurriedly stopped her and said, don't blindly show off. If you can't even make a fist, how are you going to practice? Wait a few days. However, it's fine if you've forgotten those moves. It might be better to practice them again. After saying that, he laughed and went to practice. Zhang Xiaohua had nothing to say. She could only get into the horse stance and watch the others practice. Seeing Nie Xiao and the others practice set after set of fist techniques, palm techniques, sword techniques, etc., Zhang Xiaohua was very envious. When would she have such a day? He Tianshu, on the other hand, was practicing under a tree. His movements were very slow, but Zhang Xiaohua could clearly feel the power of each move. Each move could bring about a kind of power. It was not like when he was practicing his own boxing. It was just a move. Only the offensive moves had pure power. He could not help but be moved in his heart. Was this the internal energy that Zhang Xiaohu was talking about? Thus, Zhang Xiaohua concentrated on watching He Tianshu practice, hoping to discover something from it. Unfortunately, when He Tianshu finished practicing a set of fist techniques, he could only feel that the other person's fist techniques were vigorous and vigorous. He couldn't see anything else. Even the moves were vague. Could it be that the Zhang Xiaohua who forgot the moves was back again? Or was the feng shui of Huanxi Mountain Villa not as good as the Lotus Escort Agency? After He Tianshu finished practicing the fist techniques, he walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's motionless body, he said with satisfaction, Zhang Xiaohua, your horse stance is really good. Other than your right arm, the other parts are the same as what I taught you before. Your horse stance level is really not ordinary. When our Misty School has a horse stance competition, I will definitely recommend you to go. You will definitely get first place. Zhang Xiaohua said happily, really, Captain He, if there is such an opportunity, you must call me. When will it be? He Tianshu smiled and said, okay, no problem. When the time comes, I will definitely call you. Okay, you should take it too. Rest early. Tomorrow, you should follow Nie Xiao. You don't want to stay in the house alone anyway. Zhang Xiaohua jumped up and said, okay, I know. But in her heart, she was still thinking, when would the time come? Following behind He Tianshu, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but ask, Captain He, when you were practicing just now, did you use internal energy? He Tianshu stopped in his tracks and turned around to ask, how did you know? Zhang Xiaohua said, I saw that your fist techniques were different from mine. It seemed like there was power hidden in the moves. My recruitment was purely based on the moves. He Tianshu was silent and said, your eyesight or intuition is really good. It's like this. Zhang Xiaohua probed, Captain He, this internal energy cultivation method, can you teach me? He Tianshu smiled and raised his hand, internal energy cultivation method. You learned it from the Lotus Flower Escort Agency? Zhang Xiaohua said, yes, I heard it from my second brother. He is an escort at the escort agency and is now learning internal energy at the martial arts school. He Tianshu was stunned and asked, your second brother is an escort, but he is learning internal energy at the martial arts school? Zhang Xiaohua said, yes, it's like this. He Tianshu said, it seems that your second brother is not like you. He should be an expert in martial arts. Most martial arts schools only teach internal energy cultivation methods to the elites. Zhang Xiaohua said proudly, yes, my second brother is a genius. That's why he can learn internal energy at the martial arts school. Then, She asked expectantly, do you think I can learn it? Chapter 108. He Tianshu sighed and said, Xiaohua, it's not that I don't want to teach you, but, first, the inner strength method that I learned is only for the disciples of the Misty School. It cannot be taught to anyone who isn't a disciple of the school. If it is discovered that it was taught privately, not only will I be punished by the discipline hall, you will also be crippled of your martial arts. Second, this inner strength method is not like fist techniques. It requires talent. If your talent is not good, then you will not have any progress after practicing for several years. Did your second brother also tell you this? He can't teach you inner strength. Zhang Xiaohua nodded disappointedly and said, yes, second brother also said this. He Tianshu rubbed Zhang Xiaohua's head and said, go back. Everyone has their own fate. The heavens have already arranged it. If you have this fate, then perhaps in the near future, you will be able to get what you want. Otherwise, even if you try your best, you will gain nothing. Zhang Xiaohua lowered his head and disappointedly followed He Tianshu back. Under the oil lamp, Zhang Xiaohua carefully read a book. This was not a fist technique, but some books that Li Jinfeng had left for him. During the period of recovery, he had developed a habit of reading some books at night. No matter if it was a fist technique or a book, if he didn't read it, it would seem that something was missing. He had read all the fist technique manuals that could be read, and only the books were left. There were countless books, enough for Zhang Xiaohua to read for a lifetime. Suddenly, he saw the words, reviewing the old to learn the new, and learning while practicing, in the book. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be moved. He carefully put down the book and closed his eyes to think about the fist technique manuals that he had memorized. There was no special reason why he didn't tell He Tianshu this today. It was like a child who had gotten his favorite toy and would not immediately tell the adults. The child would take it out to show off at an unexpected moment to surprise the adults. He would then look at the adults' stunned expressions and laugh loudly. That was all. Zhang Xiaohua also had the same thought, but most importantly, he still did not have confidence in himself. He was afraid that he would not be able to master these fist techniques. Rather than saying it now, it would not be too late to say it when he really mastered them. Fortunately, with Zhang Xiaohua's thoughts, that fist technique was like a river, and she could still clearly recall it. However, Zhang Xiaohua's expression did not change. She raised her right hand and looked at the bandage. She touched it with her left hand for a moment, but still did not take it off. Late at night, Zhang Xiaohua blew out the light and fell asleep peacefully. In the next few days, Zhang Xiaohua followed Nie Xiao'er to familiarize herself with the planting of various medicinal herbs during the day, and practiced the horse stance at night. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that Elder Yu, whom he hadn't seen for several months, would come to visit them every night. That night, Zhang Xiaohua was still reading under the oil lamp when she heard someone knocking on the door. Zhang Xiaohua was startled. This was the first time someone had knocked on the door at night. Thus, she put down her book and opened the door. Using the light in the room, it was actually the one-armed Elder Yu. Zhang Xiaohua was very surprised. Elder Yu, how are you? Please come in. After Zhang Xiaohua invited Elder Yu into the room and invited him to sit on the chair, she said, Elder Yu, I've been back for many days, but I haven't seen you. Are you very busy? Elder Yu smiled. Not to mention that you've only been back for a few days. How many times have you seen me during the month you stayed in the villa? Zhang Xiaohua said, it's because I haven't seen you for several months, so I'm a little surprised. Why are you here today? Elder Yu said, it's nothing much. I just heard that you're back, so I came to take a look at your injuries. Zhang Xiaohua was a little flattered. Thank you for your concern, Elder Yu. I should be fine now. I'll get Captain He to take a look tomorrow and remove the bandage. Elder Yu waved his hand. There's no need to wait until tomorrow. I'll help you remove it now. The recovery of a bone injury isn't something that can be determined in a day or two. Zhang Xiaohua was more curious about Elder Yu's attitude. From the first time they met, he was neither cold nor indifferent to her. Why was he so concerned about her today? It was thought-provoking. However, Elder Yu was an old man after all, and he was concerned about her. Zhang Xiaohua also respected her elders, so Zhang Xiaohua allowed Elder Yu to remove the bandage on her hand. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua's injuries were already healed. The bandage was just a form of psychological sustenance. Just as Elder Yu said, there was no difference whether he removed it today or tomorrow. Thus, even though Elder Yu only had one right hand, he was still able to remove the bandage easily with Zhang Xiaohua's help. Zhang Xiaohua's right hand didn't look any different from before. It was just that her skin was abnormally pale, probably due to the lack of light. Elder Yu didn't immediately examine Zhang Xiaohua's fingers. Instead, he said, "Try clenching your fist first." Zhang Xiaohua obeyed and tried to retract her fingers. This was a very normal action in the past, but now, it was abnormally clumsy. Even her fingers didn't seem to listen to her. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua's fingers were retracted to a certain extent. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't move them further. In other words, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't even clench her fist. Zhang Xiaohua panicked. "Elder Yu, what's going on? My hand. Why is my hand like this?" Elder Yu said amiably, "Don't be anxious. It's always like this after an injury. In the future, you have to practice retracting your fingers frequently. It'll take time for you to recover. Now, let me take a look at the details of your bones." Then, Elder Yu used his thumb and index finger to pinch Zhang Xiaohua's fingers. He examined them inch by inch. After a long while, he finally finished examining. Elder Yu raised his head. Under the light of the oil lamp, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see his expression. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to ask, but when she looked at her hand, she didn't see anything wrong with it, so she didn't ask. Elder Yu also didn't tell Zhang Xiaohua about the recovery of her bones. Instead, he asked her, "Why do you want to learn martial arts?" Zhang Xiaohua was baffled. She didn't understand and replied, "Of course it's to protect my family." "Other than protecting your family, what else will you do if you learn martial arts?" Elder Yu asked. Zhang Xiaohua furrowed her brows and answered honestly, "No, I haven't thought that much. Right now, I just want to practice my fist techniques." This time, it was Elder Yu's turn to furrow his brows. He asked again, "Then after you learn martial arts, will you help the weak and help the strong? Will you help the weak?" Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua's mind immediately flashed with the scene of her and her father being bullied in Lu Town, and the scene of her and her elder brother being trampled on the ground by the strong people of Shichui Mountain. She couldn't help but feel her blood boil. She spat out, "Of course I will. If I learn martial arts and have the ability to help others and help the weak, of course I will do it." Elder Yu asked again, "Then are you sure that the weak are wronged and should be helped?" Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. "Elder Yu, this, I don't understand. If the weak don't have a reason, why would they provoke the strong?" Elder Yu smiled and said, "This question is a bit difficult. You're still young and don't understand people's hearts. Perhaps you'll understand in the future." Then, he asked again, "Then if you want to help the weak and help the strong, but the strong person's martial arts are stronger than yours, will you help?" This sentence made Zhang Xiaohua not know how to answer. This time in Lu Town, of course, it was Zhang Xiaolong who stepped forward bravely. He wasn't afraid of the strong, but the result was also disastrous. She remembered it clearly. Mr. Liu and Liu Kai also reminded her to act according to her ability. This question was really hard to answer. However, in an instant, a thought flashed through her mind. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Isn't this the reason why I have to continuously practice fist techniques and even internal strength?" Elder Yu furrowed his brows and then relaxed. He didn't ask Zhang Xiaohua any more questions. Instead, he looked at Zhang Xiaohua's right hand and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, although the bones in your right hand have healed, it was still damaged by internal strength. It's no longer the same as before. It's like a broken vase. No matter how much it's repaired, it can still be used. However, the cracks in the vase still exist. This can't be repaired easily. If you're not careful, it can still be broken. This will be a huge hindrance to your martial arts. You must be mentally prepared. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand the seriousness of the problem. She smiled and said, "This situation, the escort agency's doctor has already told me. I'll slowly recover. Bones can grow back. After all, it's different from a vase. As long as I can practice fist techniques and internal strength, it's fine. I'm not thinking of saving the entire martial arts world." Elder Yu sighed and didn't say anything else. He only nodded his head and told Zhang Xiaohua to rest early. He then turned around and left. Zhang Xiaohua sent him to the door. Looking at Elder Yu's back in the night, she was very puzzled. This old man had stayed in her room for so long and asked so many questions. What exactly did he want? Zhang Xiaohua didn't think that it was as simple as removing the bandages and checking on her injuries. However, what exactly was the reason? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't figure it out even after thinking for a long time. However, time was the answer to all questions. When the time came, she would naturally know. Zhang Xiaohua fell asleep as she thought about it. She didn't even blow out the oil lamp. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua went to the place where He Tianshu and the others were practicing martial arts as usual. As he walked, he stretched and stretched his fingers, continuously practicing. As usual, Zhang Xiaohua was the first to arrive. He didn't get into the horse stance. Instead, he clenched his fists and tried out a few fist techniques. He realized that even if he didn't clench his fists, he could still execute a complete move without any discomfort. It was just that when his right hand changed between fist and palm, it was a little sluggish and his fingers were a little stiff. Presumably, through his continuous practice, it would gradually improve in the future. Thinking about how he didn't dare to practice martial arts for fear of affecting the recovery of his fingers, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but find it funny. If he had known earlier, he would have started practicing martial arts a long time ago. He wouldn't have to watch He Tianshu and the others practice martial arts every day while he himself was in the horse stance. However, he had forgotten that he couldn't clench his fists before removing the bandages. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was happily practicing, He Tianshu and the others came over. He Tianshu smiled and greeted Zhang Xiaohua. "Zhang Xiaohua, why are you up so early? Are you impatient to remove the bandages?" Zhang Xiaohua grinned as he stretched out his right hand and clenched his fist. He boasted, "Captain He, look, I've already removed the bandages. It's just that my fingers still can't bend completely. I still need to train more." He Tianshu scolded with a smile, "Child, you're really impatient. Didn't we agree to remove it today? Why did you remove it by yourself?" Zhang Xiaohua replied seriously, "Captain He, you're wrongly accusing me. I listened to you and was prepared to let you remove it today. However, Elder Yu came to my room last night and removed it for me." He Tianshu asked curiously, "What's going on?" Thus, Zhang Xiaohua told He Tianshu everything that happened last night. He Tianshu was also confused, but when he heard Elder Yu's questions for Zhang Xiaohua, he furrowed his brows. Elder Yu was clearly admiring Zhang Xiaohua's character. Could it be that Elder Yu wanted to take in a disciple? However, He Tianshu wasn't too clear about Elder Yu's background. He had only vaguely heard about him from others. He could be considered a figure in the pugilistic world. If he was interested in Zhang Xiaohua, then it was Zhang Xiaohua's fortune. But what about Zhang Xiaohua's hands? He Tianshu couldn't help but feel suspicious. Then, he felt relieved. This was someone else's business. He couldn't accept Zhang Xiaohua no matter what, so why should he worry about it? Then, he thought of the few questions Zhang Xiaohua had answered and thought to himself, this Zhang Xiaohua is really an honest child. If he was a little smarter, he would have climbed up the pole long ago. Even if he didn't fill the sky with lotuses, he would definitely not give up. At the very least, he would have made a statement for justice, for peace, and for the happiness of the people of Jianghu. Sigh, who knew that this Zhang Xiaohua only cared about protecting his family and practicing his fist techniques? He actually didn't understand the hidden meaning in Elder Yu's words. If he did, he would have knelt on the ground and begged Elder Yu to accept him. What a pity. But, if that was the case, would she still be Zhang Xiaohua? He Tianshu shook his head. This Zhang Xiaohua wasn't the down-to-earth Zhang Xiaohua that everyone liked. The pugilistic world still needed people who could do things. When Zhang Xiaohua saw He Tianshu shaking his head and knitting his brows, he couldn't help asking, Captain He, Elder Yu is doing this for my own good. He wants to take a look at my injuries, so please don't be angry. He Tianshu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He glared at her and said, Am I that petty? Are you angry that someone took off your bandage first? Zhang Xiaohua stuck out her tongue and didn't dare to speak. Then, she said, Captain He, since you're not angry, then I've removed the bandage. I want to practice my fist technique. Can you give me some pointers? When He Tianshu heard this, he immediately took half a step back and prepared to use his qinggong. He said, How about this, you first do some recovery exercises and revise your previous fist techniques. As for the new fist techniques, I'll ask Nie Xiao'er to teach you, okay? After he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Zhang Xiaohua's reply and ran away with his qinggong. Zhang Xiaohua was left behind and asked curiously, Why did you run away so fast? Captain He, I didn't plan on asking you to teach me. I've already memorized a lot of fist techniques. I just wanted you to watch from the side. Why did you run away? Then, just as she was about to look for Nie Xiao'er and the others, she found that they were nowhere to be seen. Zhang Xiaohua felt a burst of admiration. It was so good to have qinggong. Since there was no one to guide her, Zhang Xiaohua didn't mind. She had so many fist techniques in her mind and every set was deeply engraved in her memory. If she wanted to perform them all, it wasn't impossible. She didn't need anyone to teach her. Thinking about this, the corners of Zhang Xiaohua's mouth slowly curled up. She thought to herself, wait until I've practiced all the fist techniques. See if I don't get a dustpan to collect your dropped jaws. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua took up a stance and began her first practice after recovering from her injury. Zhang Xiaohua had a lot of fist techniques in her mind. She didn't deliberately choose one and just randomly picked one. She narrowed her eyes and searched her memory. Then, she started practicing with the figure in her mind. After the first practice, it could be said to be perfect. It was almost exactly the same as Zhang Xiaohua's memory. Zhang Xiaohua was extremely happy. Could it be that she really wasn't trash? Was there a problem with Captain He's teaching method? Could it be that only by looking at the fist techniques and memorizing them in her mind could she truly learn the complete fist techniques? A series of questions prompted Zhang Xiaohua to immediately practice a second time. The result was very satisfactory. He didn't miss any moves. Unfortunately, it was already late. There wasn't much time for Zhang Xiaohua to verify it a third time. He hurried to the dining room. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't, or maybe he didn't even notice that the figure in his mind had faded a lot. It wasn't as clear as before. Now, Zhang Xiaohua had already gotten into character. He followed Nie Xiao'er to do some basic chores. He was already very used to using his left hand. His left hand could complete everything very flexibly. However, when he wasn't very busy or felt that he had time, Zhang Xiaohua insisted on using his right hand, even though it was a little clumsy. Today, he deliberately used his right hand, such as holding a small shovel, small scissors, and so on. This was because he knew that only by training his right hand as soon as possible could he truly learn the fist techniques as soon as possible. This was because he could already perform a complete set of fist techniques today. Just thinking about it made his heart burn. After dinner, Zhang Xiaohua went to the practice area early. However, he didn't stay in the same place. Instead, he walked outside for a while, far away from He Tianshu and the others. However, he didn't have to worry that He Tianshu couldn't find him. Although it was far away, there were lanterns hanging on the trees. Just as Zhang Xiaohua thought, as soon as He Tianshu and the others went out, they saw Zhang Xiaohua's lantern from afar. They thought that he was shy and didn't want to show his incomplete moves. He Tianshu even praised Zhang Xiaohua in his heart. Now that his injury was healed, he knew how to be shy. In the past, he was very thick-skinned when practicing fist techniques. He forgot one move after another without blushing. Zhang Xiaohua stood under the tree and calmed his emotions. He slowly practiced the set of fist techniques again in the morning. He could actually finish it without missing a move. He was naturally very happy. He could finally confirm that he could finish a set of fist techniques. How could he not be happy? Just as he was about to run over to He Tianshu to report the good news, he remembered that He Tianshu was also practicing. He could wait until tomorrow. Thus, he began to think about whether he could practice the second set of fist techniques. He practiced as he wished. The moves of the fist techniques were all in his mind. Zhang Xiaohua didn't stop practicing the second set. Sure enough, the effect was as obvious as the first set. He could still perform it completely. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua was very excited. He practiced the two sets of fist techniques from beginning to end, over and over again. Please collect it. Thank you. Chapter 109. It was a pity that Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that as he practiced over and over again, his moves were slowly changing, gradually breaking away from the original records in the manual. Moreover, the figure in his mind was slowly blurring, as if he was forgetting the deeply engraved moves in the manual. Zhang Xiaohua, who finished practicing, felt very comfortable. He read a book under the oil lamp for a while, then went to bed early. Even in his dreams, there was a smile on his face. When he woke up in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua excitedly ran to the training grounds, full of joy. He waited there as if he was presenting a treasure, wanting to give He Tianshu and Nie Xiao a surprise. He Tianshu and the others saw Zhang Xiaohua standing there early in the morning, but they didn't find it strange. This guy woke up so early every day, who knows where the sleepiness of a youth went. Everyone greeted him normally and then went back to practicing. Only He Tianshu smiled and asked, Zhang Xiaohua, why did you run so far last night? Were you practicing some peerless martial arts? You're even hiding it and not letting us see. However, any peerless martial arts requires a good body to practice. You have to first take care of your body. You have to know that the body is the capital to roam the Jianghu. After He Tianshu finished teasing, he prepared to leave. Zhang Xiaohua mysteriously said, Captain He, I really did practice some peerless martial arts yesterday. Do you want to see? He Tianshu stopped in his tracks and raised his eyebrows, secretly thinking, not bad, you actually know how to counter lust. This child can be taught. However, if you want to spar with me, you're still too inexperienced. Thus, he went with the flow and crossed his arms in front of his chest, shouting loudly, little ones, come over. Zhang Xiaohua wants to show us some peerless martial arts. Nie Xiao and the others heard the captain's call and immediately used their movement skills to gather. Everyone looked at Zhang Xiaohua, their eyes full of smiles. The four of them knew Zhang Xiaohua's aptitude. Who would expect Zhang Xiaohua to practice some peerless martial arts? They just didn't see each other last night. What kind of fortuitous encounter could there be? Their actions today were just adding to the jokes in their lives, treating Zhang Xiaohua as their own cute little brother. Zhang Xiaohua saw that everyone's eyes were fixed on him. He was originally full of confidence, but now he was a little nervous. He muttered, it's not some peerless martial arts. It's just that I practiced 2 sets of fist techniques yesterday and can perform them completely. Everyone was surprised, is that so? Really? It must be a peerless martial art. Our little blossom wouldn't be able to remember ordinary fist techniques. Zhang Xiaohua ignored their teasing. He calmed himself down, got into a horse stance, and prepared to start practicing the fist technique he had practiced the day before. However, when he raised his arm, he didn't know where to hit. He had actually forgotten. His mind went blank. What was going on? Zhang's his, how he's yesterday, he was very familiar with it. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua raise his arm to hit but stop, everyone's heart was like a mirror. They smiled and said, Zhang Xiaohua, hurry up. We can't wait to see it. After Zhang Xiaohua's panic, he was slightly disappointed. He could only say, I forgot this set. Watch my next set. He thought to himself, sigh, it's not the first time I've been mocked by you guys. I'll get used to it. However, the gods passing by must bless me. Please don't let me forget the next set of fist techniques. Even if I can remember 1 or 2 moves, it's fine. Sure enough, perhaps Zhang Xiaohua's prayer was effective. A god flew over Zhang Xiaohua's head. In short, Zhang Xiaohua really performed 2 sets of fist techniques in front of He Tianshu and the others. However, these 2 sets of fist techniques were not connected to each other. He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's 2 sets of fist techniques and thought for a long time. He asked, Zhang Xiaohua, these 2 sets of fist techniques seem to be from the South Branch fist? However, the way you're fighting seems to be different from what I know. Zhang Xiaohua clasped his hands and stood there pitifully. He didn't know what to say or do. He really wanted to prove that he wasn't a good-for-nothing. He really wanted to show He Tianshu all the fist techniques he knew according to the fist technique manual in his mind. However, he was afraid that all the fist techniques would be yesterday's reenactment, and he would forget them the next day. In that case, he might as well not let them know that he had memorized a lot of fist techniques. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's appearance, He Tianshu's heart ached. He walked up to him and patted his head, saying, Zhang Xiaohua, I know you're in the escort agency. Although you're recuperating, I'm sure you still want to practice your fist techniques. You must have learned these 2 sets of fist techniques from the escort agency and now you want to show them to us. I didn't see all of your moves today, but I believe you must have worked hard and learned them before. So, Zhang Xiaohua, you have to pull yourself together. If others can learn it after practicing it once, you can practice it 10 times, 100 times. You can do it. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were filled with tears. When he heard He Tianshu's words, he couldn't help but feel shocked. He wiped his tears with his left sleeve and asked unconfidently, Captain He, can I really do it? He Tianshu nodded and said firmly, yes. However, he prayed in his heart, gods and Buddhas all over the sky, please forgive my lies. I'm doing this for Zhang Xiaohua's sake. Only you guys will know if it's true or not, right? Zhang Xiaohua seemed to be really encouraged. The dispirited look on his face was swept away. He smiled and said, all right, I'll definitely work hard and not let you down, Captain He. He Tianshu smiled and said, I believe that. You definitely won't. However, in his heart, he thought, I don't have any expectations at all. You won't let me down at all. The 3 people beside him also said, Xiaohua, you must work hard. We all have high hopes for you. After breakfast, He Tianshu was going to lead the 4 people to work in the medicine field. However, Zhang Xiaohua asked He Tianshu for leave and wanted to rest for a day. He Tianshu naturally agreed without hesitation. Zhang Xiaohua's injuries had just healed and he was still resting. A few days ago, Zhang Xiaohua had insisted on working. He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's somewhat injured right hand and felt very uncomfortable. Today, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to take a day off. He even said that he wanted Zhang Xiaohua to rest for a few more days. Zhang Xiaohua stayed in the room alone and thought carefully. The memories of the 2 sets of fist techniques from yesterday no longer existed in his mind. However, there were 2 more moves that were similar to the Arhat fist. Zhang Xiaohua seemed to understand that the fist techniques he learned from He Tianshu were no different from the fist techniques he learned from the manual. It wasn't that he suddenly became enlightened. He would still forget the moves. The moves that were left in his mind were only memories. He hadn't mastered them yet. When he started practicing, those complete fist techniques would be the same as when he learned from He Tianshu. He would forget the moves one by one. He really wasn't made for martial arts. However, Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood that everyone's path of martial arts was not the same. He had already thought about it when he was recuperating. It was just that he was blinded by his clear memory of the fist techniques and thought that he could learn the complete fist techniques. Now that he had returned to the starting point, it wasn't considered a failure. He should just obediently combine his own fist techniques and wait until he could link up a complete set of fist techniques. However, it was also good that he could clearly remember the fist techniques. It was equivalent to finding himself a master. He didn't need to look for others to learn fist techniques. It provided him with good materials to combine his fist techniques. There were more than 100 sets of fist techniques in his mind. He didn't know if he could complete a complete set of fist techniques after he finished practicing them. Sighing, Zhang Xiaohua didn't think about it anymore. He pushed open the door and went out. He still went to the place where he practiced last night. He gathered his thoughts and started yesterday again according to his memory. In fact, the most important thing in doing anything was to find the goal and not the twists and turns in the process. From Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts practice process, it deeply illustrated this point. What Zhang Xiaohua didn't lack was that kind of hard work and that kind of tenacity unique to country people. What he didn't have was that kind of vision from a high vantage point. There was also no one to guide him and give him pointers. There was also no one to tailor his clothes and assign a one-on-one training plan for him. Even if Tianshu liked this young man very much and could teach him martial arts fist techniques, there were times when he wouldn't specifically work hard for him. After all, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't his disciple and wasn't his blood relative. Tianshu could teach Zhang Xiaohua so much and enlighten him on his fist techniques. It was already quite good. Otherwise, this country youth could only wave a small medicine spatula and dream about his martial arts. Nia Xiao'er was the same. Now that Zhang Xiaohua had found the path that suited him, he was like a tiger that had grown wings. Naturally, he was unstoppable. He practiced a certain fist technique in his memory over and over again, experiencing the changes in his memory. But what surprised him was that no matter how he practiced, the memory in his mind remained the same. It didn't become blurry because of the familiarity of the moves. This was really strange. So he started practicing the second set of fist techniques. This time, he didn't practice too much. He only practiced it twice to familiarize himself with the fist technique before practicing the third set. This third set, he practiced it about 10 times and confirmed that he was very familiar with it. On this day of holiday, Zhang Xiaohua was practicing his fist techniques from morning to night. He practiced about 10 sets of fist techniques. Except for the morning practice, when he paid more attention to the fist techniques in his memory, Zhang Xiaohua didn't deliberately observe the other fist techniques. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the foot of the tree with uneasiness and anticipation. He took up his stance. Sure enough, as Zhang Xiaohua expected, the fist techniques that he had familiarized himself with the day before had all disappeared from his memory. What was left behind were the fragmented moves that he had memorized deeply. It was difficult to forget them even if he wanted to. As for whether these moves were the same as the ones in the manual, it was easy to figure out the answer. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't disappointed because of the past. Instead, he was faintly excited. It seemed that he had found an unusual path. Whether this path was correct or not was still unknown. He needed to continue working hard and slowly explore. However, as the saying goes, everyone has a time when they cross the river by feeling the stones. Wasn't making a mistake just like paying tuition? Zhang Xiaohua was still young. If he made a mistake, even the heavens would forgive him. Since it was a set of fist techniques, no matter if he practiced it 3 times, 10 times, or even dozens of times, he would eventually forget it. The moves would have to be changed. Zhang Xiaohua naturally wasn't stupid enough to practice each fist technique dozens of times. He successfully practiced 3 sets of fist techniques in one morning. During the day, Zhang Xiaohua didn't officially start working in the herbal field. Therefore, he just followed behind Nia Xiao'er. In his free time, he was still recuperating in the escort agency. He slowly combined the remaining moves in his mind. However, perhaps it was because he didn't have many moves now. He could only link the previous two moves together. This made Zhang Xiaohua feel a little uneasy. He didn't know if his choice was correct. At night, Zhang Xiaohua was still practicing his fist techniques like he was in the morning. He stayed far away from He Tianshu and the others. However, Zhang Xiaohua still found that he could still practice the fist techniques that he practiced in the morning at night. He couldn't spend the night watching it. Could it be that something would happen at night? Or was it because he was so stupid that he couldn't take a good rest? Zhang Xiaohua had his doubts for the first time. Practicing fist techniques in the morning and at night, and building blocks in the day. This was Zhang Xiaohua's happy life. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was enjoying this comfortable life, a pair of eyes kept observing him. It was the one-armed elder Yu. However, his qigong was so good that even He Tianshu might not be able to detect him, let alone Zhang Xiaohua. However, when Elder Yu saw Zhang Xiaohua diligently practicing the fist techniques that were popular in the pugilistic world, he was very surprised. He didn't know where this child learned so much rubbish. Didn't he know that it was better to eat a fresh peach than to eat a basket of rotten apricots? What was the use of practicing such rubbish? He really didn't understand. Elder Yu secretly shook his head. However, when he saw Zhang Xiaohua's messy, incomplete, and error-filled moves in the morning, he almost fell down from the wall he was standing on. What kind of talent was this? It was simply the best in the world. Elder Yu's head shook so hard that it almost hit Grandma's bridge. The only thing that made him feel gratified was that Zhang Xiaohua would practice his fist techniques under the tree whenever he had the time. This hard work was really worthy of praise. However, how much could hard work be worth? Zhang Xiaohua's passion finally ignited at noon one day. On his way back, his mind kept thinking about those unrelated moves of his. Suddenly, there were two moves that were perfectly combined. Zhang Xiaohua was so happy that he almost jumped up. What did this mean? It meant that he had chosen the right path, and it was the right path for him to practice martial arts. At night, Zhang Xiaohua was even more hardworking. He practiced a few sets of fist techniques in a row. He wasn't tired, but the fingers on his right hand were really sore. He couldn't continue practicing. If he didn't make a fist, then it could only be a palm technique. If he made a mistake, then the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to try. Day after day, the fist techniques in Zhang Xiaohua's mind were slowly forgotten. In another river of memories, there were more and more incomplete moves, and there were more and more moves that could be combined. Zhang Xiaohua was constantly accumulating and improving. As for He Tianshu and the others, when they saw Zhang Xiaohua hiding under a tree and practicing alone, they really wanted to ask about it. However, when they thought of his amazing memory, they retreated. Anyway, Zhang Xiaohua was only practicing fist techniques and wouldn't go crazy, so they just let him be. In fact, He Tianshu might not have other thoughts. He knew about the injury on Zhang Xiaohua's right hand. Although he wasn't a doctor, for such a serious injury, as long as one practiced martial arts, most people would have a certain idea. That was, his right hand was crippled. Why? Fists were used to hit others. If it was a fracture, it would be fine. After the injury was healed, when the fist was used as a weapon, other bones could be used as support to protect the fractured area. However, Zhang Xiaohua's fracture was the entire palm. Imagine if such a fist was used, where could it exert force? People often say that to kill 1,000 enemies, you lose 800 of your own men. If one's fist couldn't exert force, how could it exert force on the opponent? Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua was born with great strength. One arm had the strength of 250 kilograms. He was afraid that before the 250 kilograms of strength could make the opponent beg for mercy, the rebound force would cause Zhang Xiaohua's right hand to break again. Therefore, He Tianshu also intentionally or unintentionally wanted to stop Zhang Xiaohua from progressing further on the path of martial arts. What fist technique could Zhang Xiaohua practice by himself over there? It was just the same few moves over and over again. There wouldn't be any major mistakes. He was too lazy to look at it and let Zhang Xiaohua play by himself. There was always an end to everything. That night, Zhang Xiaohua finally practiced all the fist techniques in his memory. He secretly let out a sigh of relief. While practicing, the combination of moves also improved greatly. Not only were there many moves that were linked together, there were even 4, 5, and 10 moves that were perfectly linked together. However, practicing fist techniques was a simulated process while combining them was a real process of racking one's brain juice. This gave Zhang Xiaohua a headache. But fortunately, today was the last night. When he woke up tomorrow morning, it would be the time to see the real deal. He didn't know if these moves could really be combined into a complete set of fist techniques. That night, Zhang Xiaohua fell asleep with a heart full of worries. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua came to the tree early. He was already very familiar with the results of his practice. There were only 5 moves left that he still remembered clearly from yesterday's practice. Seeing that it was still early, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to use this time to combine these 5 moves into the fist technique that had already begun to take shape. But the result made Zhang Xiaohua surprised and happy. He was happy that these 5 moves were still perfectly complemented. He was surprised that this set of fist techniques still wasn't completely linked together. Zhang Xiaohua carefully thought for a moment in his mind. He realized that there were 101 moves in this set of fist techniques that he had combined. In the middle, there were 7 places that weren't linked together. He didn't know if it was because he was missing 7 moves or more. Zhang Xiaohua repeated these 101 moves twice. The gaps in the middle were only random links. He was sure that he had memorized it. As for whether he really remembered it, he could only think about it tomorrow. Now, what he needed to consider was where he could find fist arts manuals and learn more fist arts to supplement his combination of fist arts. Chapter 110. Zhang Xiaohua happily walked towards the dining room. He had gained a lot from this morning, and it was also the most fulfilling and important morning he had ever had since he started practicing his fist arts. Everything pointed to a beautiful future, and all that was missing was that final push. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of Zhang Xiaohua. He jumped in fright and quickly stopped in his tracks. When he saw clearly, he patted his chest with lingering fear and said, "Elder Yu, even if your Qinggong is powerful, you don't have to show off in front of me like this. As the saying goes, people can scare people to death. You appear and disappear so mysteriously. Fortunately, my heart is very strong." "Boss," Yu said with a straight face, "how's your messy fist arts coming along?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and shouted, "Elder Yu, this is my privacy, how can you peek at it? If you want to see it, you can tell me. If you don't tell me, how would I know that you want to see it? If you don't tell me, you're hurting my heart. I'm going to report you to the village head." Elder Yu curled his lips and said, "I wouldn't even bother to look at your erroneous moves even if they were placed in front of me. Peeping? I don't have that kind of free time." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "If you didn't see it, how would you know that I'm practicing my fist arts? How would you know that it's messy?" Elder Yu said, "Who can't see you hiding under the tree every day to practice your fist arts? Everyone only knows that you can't remember the entire set of fist arts, but I'm too embarrassed to say it. Do you think I don't have ears?" Zhang Xiaohua's face turned red. He wanted to tell Elder Yu about his progress, but whether he was doing the right thing, and whether he could still remember the fist arts tomorrow, was still unknown. Thus, he told himself in his heart, "I'll endure it, okay?" Then, he raised his head and asked Elder Yu, "Just treat it as me exercising my muscles and bones. You should at least encourage me. Why are you attacking my enthusiasm for no reason? Enough, what exactly do you want? If you don't say it, the food in the dining room will be finished by Nya and the rest." Elder Yu rolled his eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Nothing much, I just wanted to tell you to wait for me under the tree where you practice tonight. I have something to tell you." Zhang Xiaohua drooped her head and said, "Elder Yu, you've defeated me. didn't you say that I wouldn't go tonight? Do I need you to tell me? Elder Yu's crafty scheme seemed to have succeeded as he said, I deliberately told you because I wanted you to pay attention to it and be mentally prepared. Secondly, there's a dish of pork belly this morning. It said that it's very delicious. Nya said that you always fight with him for it. He saw me just now and told me to tell you to go in a little later. He'll let you in after he's done eating. It's about time now. You should go. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Elder Yu's disrespectful behavior and said fiercely, Elder Yu, you're ruthless. After speaking, she dashed into the dining room like a wisp of smoke, as if there was a dog chasing after her. At night, Zhang Xiaohua waited under the tree as Elder Yu said. Elder Yu didn't say when he would come over, so he calmly practiced his set of martial arts. When he was done, he heard someone cheering beside him. He looked up and saw that it was Elder Yu. Elder Yu said with praise, Zhang Xiaohua, I see that you're quite smart. These messy moves were actually practiced by you. It's almost like a real set of martial arts. It seems like I have to look at you in a new light. Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, Elder Yu, I don't have a choice. You said this morning that I really can't remember the entire set of martial arts. I can only practice it myself. It's better than not having any martial arts to practice. Elder Yu nodded and said, your determination to pursue martial arts is really good. There are thousands of paths to success in this world. As long as you can find one and persevere, even if there's no result, you won't regret it. One day, when you look back, you'll be able to console yourself with pride that you've worked hard. Zhang Xiaohua thanked him, thank you for your guidance, Elder Yu. I'll work hard myself. Elder Yu asked again, Zhang Xiaohua, this set of martial arts of yours seems to be intermittent. You can't practice it in one go. It's like you can't finish a sentence and have to pause in the middle. Although the competition doesn't have to be particular about routines, an intermittent set of martial arts will cause you to not be able to practice to the best effect. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, Elder Yu, I heard that the highest realm of martial arts is to have no moves. My intermittent set of martial arts might be an evolution towards that realm. Elder Yu smiled and said, I don't know about the realm of no moves. That's a legendary realm. Perhaps only the top few in the martial arts world have it. Perhaps it's just a legend. Zhang Xiaohua took the opportunity to ask, Elder Yu, do you have a set of martial arts manuals? I want to take a look. Can you lend it to me? Elder Yu was stunned and said, set of martial arts manuals? I do. How come you know how to read them? That's impossible. Aren't you illiterate? Zhang Xiaohua said, Elder Yu, you're looking down on me too much. I was illiterate before, but that doesn't mean I won't be able to read now or in the future. Elder Yu thought for a moment and said, oh right, the last time I went to your room, you were reading a book. Could it be that you learned how to read while you were recuperating? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Elder Yu is wise. Elder Yu smiled and said, but martial arts manuals are different from reading. Being able to read doesn't mean you can understand them. Zhang Xiaohua said, Elder Yu, you don't have to worry about this. I've seen their collection of martial arts manuals at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. I should be able to understand it. Elder Yu said, all right then. Come to my room when you have time. I'll find a set of martial arts manuals for you to read. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, then I'll have to thank Elder Yu. She then asked, oh right, Elder Yu, why are you looking for me tonight? Elder Yu looked at the full moon in the sky and said with a nostalgic tone, once you're in the martial arts world, you can't imagine the splendor of the martial arts world. Once you're in the martial arts world, time will make you grow old. Do you know, Zhang Xiaohua, there's a saying that goes, a person in the martial arts world has no choice. Only you have one foot in the martial arts world. But whether or not you're willing, the winds and waves of the martial arts world will blow you away, leaving you no choice but to go with the flow. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and said, Elder Yu, why are you telling me this? I haven't thought of entering the martial arts world yet. Elder Yu looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said seriously, Zhang Xiaohua, as long as you want to practice martial arts and learn fist techniques, then you will inevitably be contaminated by the martial arts world. You can't avoid this. Although you're still young, you seem to have already chosen this path. Unless you give up on practicing martial arts now and wholeheartedly focus on farming in this villa. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, I only practice martial arts to protect my family. Although I'm envious of the hot-bloodedness of the martial arts world, with my skills, it's still too early for me. Oh right, don't tell me you're going to tell me about the martial arts world today. Elder Yu said, don't be anxious, Zhang Xiaohua. I'm telling you about the dangers of the martial arts world because I want you to know that if you insist on practicing martial arts, then you must have the awareness to enter the martial arts world. And to survive in the martial arts world, the most important thing is to have the means to protect your life. Zhang Xiaohua still didn't understand. Elder Yu sighed and said, actually, I'm telling you so much because I want you to know the dangers of the martial arts world and dispel your thoughts of practicing martial arts. You don't seem to understand the severity of the injury on your right hand. Zhang Xiaohua asked anxiously, how serious is it, Elder Yu? Didn't the doctor say that I can still practice fist techniques? Elder Yu said, the doctor didn't lie to you. You can practice fist techniques, but your right hand is already crippled. It's not very possible for you to really compete with others. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and said, what's going on? Elder Yu, you must explain it to me clearly. Thus, Elder Yu told her about Zhang Xiaohua's injury from beginning to end. Zhang Xiaohua's face was ashen. She really didn't think too much about it and thought that it would be fine as long as her bones healed. But now that she heard Elder Yu's words, she realized that things were far from as simple as she thought. Since her fist couldn't effectively attack others, then it was naturally crippled. Then what was the use of practicing fist techniques? Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua's expression was strange, Elder Yu didn't continue speaking and waited quietly for a while. When Zhang Xiaohua's emotions calmed down a little, he asked again, then, do you still want to practice martial arts now? Zhang Xiaohua still nodded and said with a determined gaze, practice martial arts, why not? Didn't you say just now that I've found my own path, I have to walk it to the end? Even if there's no result, I won't regret it. My right hand is crippled, but I still have my left hand. Even if I use my left hand, I can still practice fist techniques well and protect my family. Elder Yu's expression was as expected and said, child, you're really a person who walks the path to the end. I came here today for 2 reasons, and I've already said one. Since you don't want to give up on practicing martial arts, then I have a second suggestion. Are you willing to listen? Zhang Xiaohua sucked in her lips and said, of course I'm willing, Elder Yu. I know you're doing this for my own good. Elder Yu said with gratification, it's good that you know. I don't know how you moved me, but I actually find you pleasing to the eye. Then, he continued, actually, in the martial arts world, the fist isn't the only thing that can save a life. Most people use weapons, such as sabers, spears, swords, halberds, and the like. Now that your fist is crippled, you can still practice with weapons. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up and said, that's right, Elder Yu. You're really amazing, you even know this. Elder Yu smiled bitterly and said, this is just common knowledge in the martial arts world. Only an inexperienced child like you wouldn't know. Don't admire me so much, it'll make me feel ashamed. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I don't have a choice, I can only admire you. But, what weapon do you think I should practice? Elder Yu said, actually, you can practice any weapon, as long as you can practice it well. Although there's a saying in the martial arts world, the spear is the king of 100 weapons, 100 staff skills, 1,000 sabers skills, 10,000 sword skills, and so on, a person's aptitude and opportunities are different. Not all people practice the same weapon. In your right-hand situation, it's best to practice a staff technique. Zhang Xiaohua frowned, staff technique? I've never seen anyone practice it before. Elder Yu, where can I find someone to teach me? Elder Yu was happy and said, with your aptitude and right hand, how can anyone teach you staff techniques? Don't even think about it. Zhang Xiaohua said worriedly, if no one teaches me such a simple staff technique, what's the point of saying so much? Elder Yu waited for a moment and said, I don't know staff techniques. Zhang Xiaohua pouted and said, if you don't know staff techniques, how are you going to teach me? Elder Yu said again, our sect's martial arts will not be taught to outsiders before we accept a disciple. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, Master, please accept this little disciple's bow. She was about to kowtow when she finished speaking. However, she was stopped by Elder Yu's arm and said, forget it. With your aptitude, I'll be angered to death if I teach you. Just save it and let me live for a few more years. When Zhang Xiaohua steadied himself, he continued, although I can't take you as my disciple, it's a coincidence that I know a sword technique. I learned it by chance, so I can consider teaching it to you. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, really, Elder Yu, you can teach me this sword technique. Elder Yu smiled and said, this sword technique is not a secret of my sect, so I naturally have the right to decide. I can teach it to you. Zhang Xiaohua said, then, thank you very much, Elder Yu. Why is there only one sword technique? Can't you teach me a few more? Don't be too stingy with me. Elder Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, Zhang Xiaohua, you lack the foundation of Jianghu. When will I enlighten you? This sword technique is different from a fist technique. A fist technique is a complete set that contains both offense and defense. It's a complete set that can strengthen the body. Some fist techniques can even be used to cultivate internal strength. On the other hand, most sword techniques are a complete set that can be used from start to finish like a fist technique. However, there is also a sword technique that has only one move. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and said, one move. How do you do it? You can't possibly do it like the fist technique I practice, right? Elder Yu explained, in a competition between weapons, it's important to use one move to defeat the enemy. If you use a sword for half a day to determine the winner, then you'll be at a disadvantage. In a competition between experts, it's fine if you don't move, but once you move, the winner will be determined. Zhang Xiaohua stuck out her tongue and said, then Elder Yu's sword technique with only one move, is it a high-quality sword technique? Elder Yu smiled and said, whether it's high quality or not depends on the person using the sword. If I use it, then it's a killing sword technique, but if you use it, then it might be for others to watch. However, Zhang Xiaohua still asked, why don't I understand? It's just a sword technique, how can you practice it? Elder Yu said, whether this sword technique is a complete set or if there are other moves, I don't know. At that time, I only practiced a single move with 19 variations. Zhang Xiaohua was flabbergasted and said, one move. 19 variations? Elder Yu said with a smile, that's right. Just this one move has 19 variations and they're all offensive moves. I believe there are other defensive variations or moves, but I don't know of them. Zhang Xiaohua asked again, then, Elder Yu, I want to ask, is there anything different between sword techniques and fist techniques? It's just that there are usually different variations in one sword technique. Elder Yu nodded and said, you're right. Normal sword techniques are like this. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua understand why she could understand fist techniques but not sword techniques. It turned out that there were so many things to pay attention to in the two techniques. Thinking that she could learn a more profound sword technique, Zhang Xiaohua became even more enthusiastic and said, Elder Yu, then please teach me now. Elder Yu said, I'm only telling you tonight. I can only teach you the specifics in the morning. You won't be able to see the subtle differences in the sword technique at night, so it's not easy to learn. Zhang Xiaohua said again, then, Elder Yu, can you let me see the power of this sword technique? Elder Yu pondered for a moment and suddenly pulled out his sword from the scabbard with one hand and pierced towards Zhang Xiaohua's throat from a strange angle. Although Zhang Xiaohua could feel the sword's momentum and direction, her body's reaction wasn't fast enough. Before Zhang Xiaohua could move, the tip of the sword was already at her chin. Zhang Xiaohua didn't pay attention to it and threw a punch at the sword. The sword retracted and changed its angle at lightning speed, stopping in front of her eyes. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the sword tip that stopped in front of her and felt a sense of helplessness. This kind of mysterious sword technique was simply too powerful. Elder Yu saw that Zhang Xiaohua wasn't moving, so he put the sword back into the scabbard. He said, "How is it? Zhang Xiaohua, is this move good?" Zhang Xiaohua said in annoyance, "Of course it's good against a rookie like me, but I wonder how others will fare. For example, Captain He." Elder Yu said proudly, "In front of this sword technique, you and He Tianshu are the same." Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were filled with stars. She wanted to learn this powerful move as soon as possible, but Elder Yu wasn't in a hurry and said, "Since I promised you and came looking for you, I will naturally teach you this sword technique. However, you have to promise me two things." Zhang Xiaohua said, "Please tell me. Even if it's to wash your socks for 10 years, I'm willing to do it." Elder Yu said, "First, you can't tell others that I taught you this sword technique. Even if others know that you know this sword technique, you can't say that I taught it to you." Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand, but she didn't ask. She only said, "That means I can't tell Captain He and my second brother either." Elder Yu nodded. Zhang Xiaohua said again, "Then, can I teach this sword technique to my second brother?" Elder Yu thought for a moment and said, "This sword technique is too sharp. If it's spread, it will cause a storm in the martial arts world. It's better not to spread it." Zhang Xiaohua agreed. Elder Yu continued, "The second thing is that once this sword technique is used, there will be no return. Blood will definitely be spilled and it will harm heaven and earth. I hope that you won't use it casually, and you won't use it unless your life is in danger. Do you understand?" Zhang Xiaohua fell into deep thought. Seeing that she understood, Elder Yu said, "I'm sure you understand now that this is a very powerful sword technique. I'm teaching it to you today so that you can save your life. I don't want you to bring it to greater heights. I hope you won't let me down and stain your sword with the blood of innocents." Zhang Xiaohua bowed sincerely and said, "Elder Yu, I understand your intentions. I will definitely remember what you said tonight and won't harm the innocent." Elder Yu smiled and said, "Actually, with your temperament, I'm not worried. You've been practicing martial arts from morning to night. Although your aptitude isn't good, you're not afraid of hardships and work tirelessly. I'm sure you'll have a bright future in the future. Being able to learn this sword technique can be considered a bright pearl that doesn't need to be covered in dust. However, when you enter the martial arts world in the future, you have to be more careful and not be too hot-blooded. What you see may not be true." Zhang Xiaohua was confused. "What you see may not be true. Please add it to your collection, thank you."